Can you hear me well? Okay, thank you. I have to step a little bit to the side so that you see me, you know. So dear colleagues and dear friends in the Age in the Workplace meeting and dear guests, it's really warm welcome to the 7th Age in the Workplace meeting in Vilnius. It's a true honor to stand before you and to greet you here in these premises. This meeting, Age in the Workplace meeting, has really a special place in my heart, and I believe it does for many of you too. So as in many previous years, we designed this program so that it covers a really diverse range of different presentations, different formats, discussions, blitz talks, and I wanted to say thank you for all of you for all these high quality submissions that made this program even possible. So thank you for being here. Also building on the success of previous events, we just had a pre-conference doctoral colloquium. So thank you for all our mentors, 12 rising stars, 12 PhD students met with their mentors and received feedback on their work, discussed how to craft their research identity, how to navigate their academic career successfully. So our gratitude goes to our mentors, Susanne Scheibe and Doreen Koy, David Dwertman, and Mo Wang. Thank you. And also our four panelists, Ariane Frodfond, Daniela Maria André, Rick Leger, and Julian Frombeck, who also shared their valuable experiences. So thank you for being here. And last but not least, I would like to say thank you for all of our sponsors. So first of all, CPAR, ARC Center for Excellence in Population Aging in Australia, Rime Lietuva, the University of Florida, Warrington College of Business, Professor Mo Wang, my own institution, ISM, University of Management in Economics, and Dr. Dalius Misunas. Thank you for, we had a really great team at ISM. Many people, many colleagues contributed to the success of this event, so thank you for supporting us and thank you for being here too. I would like also to thank the Office of the Seimas, the Secretary General of the Seimas, Professor Modestas Galbuda, for this unique opportunity to start our conference in this building, which is probably, well, at the heart of policy making, maybe related to the future of work and aging and retirement, of course. So thank you for having us here. And one more important connection to the other side of managerial practitioner policy making, Rugilė Trumpytė, who represents Lithuanian Diversity Charter. And so thank you, Rugilė, for spreading the word about the important research that this community is conducting. Thank you for making this connection to many business organizations, nonprofits who are increasingly want to learn more about how to manage age diversity in their organization. So thank you for making this connection too. Okay, and now some very practical details about how it works from now. So I will use also the opportunity to introduce our amazing doctoral students who volunteered to help in this conference. So first of all, presentation. So Asta will coordinate the presentations. Asta is here. So just approach her and she will handle everything for you. Then social media. Also, many thanks to Susanne and Doreen. Just building on last year's experience, we wanted to be strongly present on social media. So we will take a photo of you. Pranas is here. He will capture a photo of you while you are presenting, so feel free to use this photo on your social media and spread the word about this conference. Also, not forget to tag our sponsors. And past program. You have already met Tuce. So Tuce, she is responsible for two more important things. So first of all, the past program, if we are planning to stay on Friday and you have interest to participate in the tour after the conference sessions, to secure a spot, just approach Tuce and sign up for this guided tour. And one more thing, you have noticed that our PhD participants already have a sticker for our networking sticker, so we're exploring a little bit, experimenting with different ideas how we could encourage making new connections, who knows, maybe future collaborations. So you will find a variety of different networking stickers on the front desk that you can choose from, whether you want to learn about something, whether you want to spread the word that you're an expert in some area, maybe you have some amazing data but need collaborators. So choose one or two. And so please know that all our PhD students who have finished the PhD workshop are identified as the rising stars of this community. So I approach them too. And we have, of course, I noticed that that the piles with stickers saying, I'm just a cool person, they are almost all gone. So I think that says something about how amazing this community is. So thank you for being here and enjoy.
Dear participants of this amazing conference, and I dare to say dear colleagues, although I am now greeting you and warmly welcoming you as a Secretary General of the Lithuanian Parliament, I am an academic person who was deported from a wonderful institution, ISM, and I still keep my part-time engagement. So it's a wonderful feeling to be here, to see your eyes, to see this, a sense of engaged community, enthusiasm. And, when I saw you greeting each other, chatting, I thought, what the hell I am doing here? I miss this feeling. But ISM University is the best university in Lithuania. And it has many resourceful and talented people. So they have delegated me here, to help the country and to help this institution. And in my short welcome address, I am not going to say many grand words or try to outline, research trends. I will try to share perhaps a few stories. What happens when an academic with international career and enters organization which in some ways has escaped major changes. There are organizations that undergo many changes, like ministries or government departments and some agencies, but parliamentary administrations, much like regulator organizations, these somehow they escape scholarly attention and also they escape changes and innovation. So what I would like to say and to share the kind of challenges that I faced, and some of these challenges actually pertain to age and aging society and other things that are associated with that. So as an academic person who has also kind of boundary span for most of my life, and I had research stays in US, UK, Sweden, and Denmark. and studied various. I was a little bit explorer, you know. We all know to succeed in research you have to be focused, and I was exactly that type of person, but there are benefits of that. So with all these insights of entrepreneurship, innovation, and management innovation, I entered organization which has been primarily managed by politicians, and politicians are not very good in management. They're very good at telling, you know, how things should be. So what I faced was, first of all, is knowledge difference challenge, you know, knowledge asymmetry. So when I began to talk to my colleagues about human-centric organization, about innovation, about communities of practice and employee-driven innovations and all kinds of things, you know, one colleague said, you look, you know, it sounds great, you know, but it's totally unrealistic. So what happens is that basically if organization is very closed, so you are standing with, you kind of know, you have experience, you know how it feels, you know how it smells to work in a modern organization. At the same time, I know these people need it, and still it's very difficult to communicate that. And I, of course, have to tell that in terms of, you know, age distribution and age structure, we have many employees which are between 50 and 60, and I would say probably over 50% of our management team are over 50, and maybe 30% are around 60. So and they have never, you know, most of them actually, out of 40 people with managerial positions, they don't have management knowledge. They have never studied management. I'm not talking about studying management internationally or at institution like ISM. So another challenge that I faced is level of ambition. So I want more than employees, and I want more than the customers. So basically, employees within administration, they learned how to collaborate with the MPs. So if I want to change, I am the one in the middle. And I want to have to say that and find ways to, you know, to ignite, to inspire that we have to do better. And they are telling me, you know, that they are not asking for it. And when I ask customers what you would like us to do better, they say, oh, we have no problems. And then I think, wow, maybe it's time for me to go back to academia, you know, because to change 1,000 employee organization, it's really difficult. Another challenge it's legitimacy challenge. Legitimacy challenge relates to my background, and that is academic background. In our culture, if you are an academic, so basically this means that you are kind of deprived of practical experience, which is overvalued. And academic research-based insights are undervalued. So, you know, maybe 2 months after I started my position, a couple of members of parliament started telling me stories. You said, you know, they said, you know, Modestas, when you started, the whole chamber was talking, you know, this academic person, you know, will start managing. I am sure, you know, this organization will collapse in 1 month. And then 2 months later, you know, they said, okay, you know, it did not collapse in 2 months, but in 3 months it will definitely collapse. So it did not collapse, and we are moving forward. But it's a very difficult challenge when you are a little bit impatient. You want changes faster. But because of age, you know, distribution that I have described, and because of, you know, it's not only managerial, but also key experts, they are also old-timers, and many have never worked in another organization. So this organization, as much as I would like to portray it and very modern, very forward-looking, and there are many good things to say, but, you know, we have these rigidities, which are cognitive and behavioral. And this actually brings me to some questions. I don't know if I would call them research questions that, you know, that I am thinking about. And I don't know, maybe you will find these questions also relevant to you. So one of the questions that I faced, how do you enter, entry? You also, entry question, when you are expatriate, for example, you enter foreign country, you enter foreign organization. But even if you are a different kind of person and you are enter homogeneous organization, which is very different. So how do you cope? And how do you try to be innovative? How do you try to raise in performance when you have to actually change people who are about retirement age? And also letting go, it's also, it's difficult legally, but it also poses different kind of moral dilemmas. Another question that I really was struggling with and going in my mind back and forth is about how to train senior and middle level executives, leadership and other skills prior retirement. What do we do with these people? We all know these fancy books and research about 100-year life that Linda Grattan and colleagues have been writing about and others. And so how do we strategically look at it? Should we invest and try to keep it and hope that their learning curve will increase? Or we have to, and how do we integrate new talent? How do we ignite passion passion for innovation and experimentation among elderly people? If they've been penalized for it and they've been told, know your place. And now you come and you ask them to believe it, that it's possible that they can go out of their box thinking, that they should embrace growth mindset rather than fixed mindset, and it's really difficult. Also, we had many problems, or at least in my eyes, in terms of collaboration and communication. Young people who are enter organization at the age of 25, 28, and they have to work with people who are 60. And habits, what's acceptable behavior, what is ethical, and what is respectful among younger generation is totally different than those who are around 60 or prior retirement age. Also regard the choice of compensation package. So we are now implementing a new compensation system, and elderly people, they want one kind of system, and younger people want another kind of system. How do you harmonize this? And it's something we are pondering about now. So there are many things, and in going towards conclusion, I try to take some notes, also discipline myself and not to take too long. I would like to say that what we've done, and I think I cannot say we are a unique parliament in that regard, but we would like to be at least unique parliament, or one of the pioneering parliaments, which is parliamentary administrations, which is most open to research. So we developed a concept of research seminars. So in a sense that when you write research papers, you know that at the end of the research article, you have a section, managerial policy implications and all kind of that, and this is not very important sometimes. Sometimes it is, but so what we are doing, we are open so that people would come to us and tell these implications. And so we are open. We have designed kind of all how it should like. We introduced it. We started some of the research seminars with scholars in Lithuania and abroad. And so in that sense, if we are very open. And finally, I'm modest, but I have now not so modest request for you, and because you are such a resourceful and talented and dedicated research community to a very important research question, I would like you to make me and my institution a gift. So guess what I will ask now? Anyone? Yeah, somebody has said research. So what I would like to do, I don't know if it's possible. There are many papers, and each paper that you will present has this research implication or policy implication or legislative implication. So if it's possible to gather these with some kind of survey where each of you could submit one or two implications that me and my colleagues would, or you would like us to consider, we would be very grateful for that. So, yeah, it got longer as usual, but once again, very warm welcome, and I wish you very successful conference, very enjoyable, inspiring conversations, and I hope this is not the last time my colleagues will see you here at the Lithuanian Parliament. So, all the best. Thank you.
Just a small correction and clarification. Not, how did you say, first time was wrong, but the second time was right. You were delegated from ISM. So let me first introduce myself. So by the yellow color group, I am just a cool person. So nice to meet you. Some cool persons also around this room. My name is Dalius Misunas, and I'm a president of ISM University of Management and Economics. And when I came here today, one of you, I will not disclose the name, but I know who, said, wow, your president is here. And it sounded like it's not such a great thing. And then we got into the conversation. I said, so what do you mean? I said, well, when I meet my president, it can only be a bad thing. So sometimes it is like that, but it's not the case at ISM. I'm here today. I'm very happy to be here today, and not only happy, but also proud and honored. I am proud because this is a meeting that is organized by my colleagues, by ISM University as an institution, and of course, a wonderful team of people who have taken the courage and lead to organize this meeting. So congratulations to the team. And I'm honored because I can spend at least some time in a group of people who are on the mission to research, understand, discover things. And for me, it's very important that while you do that, you are thinking. And thinking is such an interesting, important, and quite scarce tool, resource. And coming back to ISM, I think ISM is quite unique in a couple of senses. First of all, in everything we do, we are trying and we manage to be quite close to business. So to the real world, to the business world, and actually today the topic is very much relevant to the business. So it helps us to keep to be on the same page, to understand what are the real problems, and to look and think about them deeper. To look for the root causes, to compare different practices, to draw some conclusions, and then what Modestas was rightly emphasizing, help and support business world to make better decisions. I myself, I don't call myself a strong researcher, definitely not in the field that you are researching. However, I have had some experience in business. And I have seen many different organizations where diversity was the topic in action. And not only diversity in a good sense, but lack of diversity as well. And if we think about the age, 15, now it's probably 15 years ago, I entered an organization. So imagine this is 15 years back from now, where I was one of the oldest employees. This was one of the big four companies, management consulting companies, where age diversity was not an objective, let's put it this way, where young age was a must condition rather than anything else. After that organization, I joined another organization which was a state-owned utility company. energy company. And you can imagine that there we also had a topic of diversity, not so high on agenda, where a lot of people were a bit older than me. And I was the CEO of the company, so this was a bit of a challenge. But also gender diversity was an interesting topic because, as you might presume, most of the people were male. And when I made a decision and convinced my board to hire for the two biggest companies in that group of companies female CEOs, I had many heads turning and many questions raised. And recently I'm on the boards of a few companies where we work internationally. And there we have the other end of the spectrum where age is considered to be a sign of wisdom, experience, long years served on important positions. And although we might assume this is good because people of more mature people are considered of greater value, still diversity is an issue. So now some companies, you might know that, next to their mature boards, they have shadow boards of young people and trying to achieve some diversity in that sense. So a very short journey around diversity. We come back to ISM, and the biggest value of ISM is our community. And I want to not continue about the research, but I want to talk about community. What is happening effectively here today, tomorrow, and on Friday, during the day and in the night, is a celebration of community. And we at ISM appreciate very much community and also celebration of community. Spending time together, knowing each other personally, exploring the diversity that we have here, geographically, culturally, and in all of the senses, is a very important part of events like this. Many years ago, I have traveled around the world because of my PhD work and presenting at the conferences. Being able to attend the conferences, being able to be exposed to the group of people there, diverse group of people, was the highest motivation for me. So this was the motivation so strong that I could make myself to write a paper. I thought, this is my objective. I need to go to this conference. I need to be in that group of people. I need to visit that country, and therefore I will try and I will make it happen. So I assume, and I'm sure that for many of you, it's also the case. You are motivated to be part of this community. And honestly, let's celebrate this community. It's worth celebrating. So have a great celebration. Today, tomorrow, we will be at ISM, so feel at home there. And during the nights, enjoy beautiful Vilnius. It's not about the weather. It's about the people and the places. There's many good people and many good places to see in Vilnius. And on behalf of someone else who is sitting here in this room, don't forget that sessions start at 9 o'clock tomorrow. So once you are enjoying Vilnius, I know it can never be enough, but at some point you will have to return and do the sharing of the knowledge. So have a great time. Thank you for attending. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you for listening as well. All the best.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rugilė from Lithuanian Diversity Charter. And how I said, Bernadetta, before coming here, I've been waiting for this conference for quite a while already, and so glad that it's finally here. The atmosphere is very good. Thank you for inviting us. Thanks for organizing all this. You know, I was thinking what to tell you today, and I know I have 5 minutes. And I remembered one article that I read last week. It's an interview with Jerry Zoltz. Maybe you know him. I admire, I follow his work. He is a prominent art critic working for New York Magazine, received a Pulitzer Prize for his criticism in 2018. But what I didn't know until 2 days back, that he started being an art critic only when he was 42. Before that, for a long time, he was a long-distance truck driver, just knowing that this is not what he wants to do for the rest of his life. And he started writing. I understand this is a very unique story. He's a star now. But I also feel this uneasiness with this example, seeing the context here in Lithuania, the country that I am from and where I work. Lithuania is one of the most aging societies in the European Union, and we feel that the more elder people become, the less confident they are. They're afraid to change jobs. They're not sure if they will get the job in the first place. This fear of how your colleagues will treat you, how they will perceive you. We got research this year telling us that 8 out of 10 people in Lithuania think that age discrimination, especially in the labor market, is either very or widespread. And of course, this brings and shows us a very big red flag for everyone working in Lithuania, for us, Lithuanian Diversity Charter as well, because we try to assist organizations, no matter public or private, to become more open, to become more inclusive, and we see those results. We know that companies recognize age diversity. They have this on their agenda, at least those companies we work with. But we also see that they're not comfortable with the topic. Probably it's one of the most uncomfortable topics within the field of diversity. Companies are asking how we should recruit people of different ages. We see that our teams, for instance, are very young. We already changed our vocabulary. We do not use the words of energetic teams, but people do not come. How we could maintain them better? What's the strategies? So we see this, and this is one of the reasons I was waiting for this conference as well. Looking at the program, agenda that you have, I very much look forward for your insights, the presentations that you'll do, and very much hope that this will find a way and play at least some role in changing the practices in the labor market. Maybe not only in Lithuania, but beyond. So thanks a lot once again, and how Bernadetta said, let's enjoy this.
Thank you very much for being here, and we can start with our scholarly presentations. So the first presentation, I'm overtaking your job, sorry. So Heike Schroeder is our first session host. Thank you so much, and no, just over to you.
It's actually not a big job, right? It's just to say amazing program. So I'm very happy to kick off the first session of our academic program by inviting Doreen Coy to present her paper on what the session is called, and I do have to write things down nowadays. The session is called Unlocking the Potential of Older Workers, which is, of course, very important amongst a lot of other things. But Doreen's presentation now is titled Growth Motives and Learning Behaviors Among Older Workers Towards Better Measures. So I suppose it's a measurement talk, or a talk on measures. Sort of. It's methodological. So I'm very excited. You've got 20 minutes. We talked about timing before, so please sit down here.
Show me just your presentation. Okay. You can manage it, and you can use also this if you need. Oh yeah, wait. Oh yeah, I was taking. Okay. Thanks a lot, Heike. So yeah. Pretty exciting to be the first presenter, also a little bit stressful actually, but I'll do my best. So this is a project that we started about a year ago together with a colleague of mine, Marianne van Boerkom. She's also from Tilburg University. She's an expert on workplace learning. And with Ruth Canver, who we actually involved later. So yeah, we started out this project because we saw some inconsistent findings in the literature. So on the one hand, you have all these meta-analyses and literature reviews that argue, based on social-emotional selectivity theory or SOC theory, that growth work motives and also learning behavior, so informal and formal learning will decrease with age. But on the other hand, there's also studies that show, it's mostly qualitative work, they show that actually older workers still learn, but they learn in a different way. So for example, they want to be much more in control of their learning process, and also they want to build on the knowledge that they already have. And also what we see is that there's studies on HR practices, so developmental HR practices, that are still very relevant for older workers. So we talked about these inconsistent findings, and we thought, well, let's do a project to dive a bit more into this. And what we actually started with was that we wanted to reconcile these findings by looking at how do we measure growth work motives and learning behavior currently. So that's what we started with. And we actually used a sort of framework to look at the measures that we currently use. And this is a framework by Doornbos and others, and they distinguish between what they call an educational and a non-educational perspective on learning, based on 6 elements related to the learning process, the social setting, and also the learning outcomes. So I will guide you through the framework. So educational perspective, as you can see right here, is very much focused on cognitive learning, rational learning, and really it's about acquiring new knowledge and new skills. It's also mainly explicit learning, really focused on learning goals, and it's also focused on remediating deficiencies, so trying to make better what's now wrong, apparently. With respect to the social setting, it's usually guided by educators, so these are the persons that guide the learning, so they decide the learning goals, the content, and also when people learn. And then for the outcomes, it's very much about individual learning, so individuals that gain this knowledge. And it's also about established truth. So the educator decides, okay, these are the goals, this is the content, and you should improve based on that particular content. So in contrast, the non-educational perspective, there they say it's not so much about a cognitive process, it's much more a participatory process to learn, and involving emotions and also professional identity. It's rather implicit, the learning, and it's not so much focused on these learning goals, but also very much on personal or work-related goals. And they say in this perspective, it's not only about remediating deficiencies, but it's actually also building on your strengths and your interests. So with respect to the social setting, many people can be involved in a learning process, but they don't necessarily have a guiding role. And then finally, with respect to the learning outcomes, they say it's not so much about individual learning, but it's also about shared learning, so shared understanding and transferring your knowledge. And it's not about getting these established truths, but it's also about maybe changing your viewpoints. So we looked at these 2 perspectives, and we felt that actually most measures use much more of an educational perspective. But we also felt that this was actually not so suitable for older workers. So let's go through the elements, and then I will show you why we think it's not so suitable for older workers. So first, like I said, so learning is really understood as more of a cognitive process and really acquiring new knowledge. But I think we all know that when people get older, their fluid intelligence starts to decrease, right? So for them, this might be much more harder to learn in this way. And also, it's much harder for older workers to really think that they are learning something new because they already know a lot. They have a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills. So really saying, okay, this is completely new for me, they are less likely to say that. Also, older workers are much more likely to learn implicit. So they have a sort of an intuitive grasp of how things work and how things could be better, but it's all very implicit. And also oftentimes focused on their personal goals and work-related goals, and not focused on learning per se. Also, older workers, they don't like to focus on remediating their deficiencies, because they are much more likely to focus on socio-emotional goals and on meaningfulness. So that's a different goal for them. With respect to the social setting, as I said also before, we know that older workers like to be much more in control of their own learning. So they wanted to really build on their existing knowledge base, they wanted to be relevant in the workplace, and they want to also decide on their own pace. So they really want to be in control themselves. With respect to the learning outcomes, so older workers are not so much focused on their own individual learning, but much more on shared learning, right? So they want to actually fulfill their own socio-emotional needs and their generativity motives. So they like to exchange knowledge and create like a shared view and not necessarily focus on their individual learning. And finally, it's not only about established truth for them. I think for older workers, it's much more about having a discussion about certain problems at work, exchanging viewpoints, thinking about their own professional identity at work, and in that way, learn. So we felt that actually this non-educational perspective would work much better for older workers compared to an educational perspective. So then we took a look at all the items that are currently used to measure these growth work motives and participation in formal and informal learning. And it's a bit too much to show all of that here because it's quite a full analysis, but I have some example items which we use to measure these growth work motives and participation in learning. So for example, it's about new skills and knowledge. It's about chances for advancement, good promotion prospects, more challenging work tasks. So from these items you could see it's very much focused on really explicit learning, really getting new knowledge and skills, and it's focused very much also on advancement and really growing. And so what we concluded from this analysis of the measures was that actually most of the measures that we use now, they focus largely on an educational perspective. So the measures for growth motives, although it's not about a learning process that is guided by educators, it's very much focused on gaining new knowledge, useful for advancing, and also very much focused on like individuals and them gaining knowledge. And measures of formal learning, they build very heavily actually on an educational perspective because it's very much about participating in training with a trainer who decides these are the learning goals, etc. And then also measures of informal learning, although they are also based on this non-educational perspective, still they are also for a very large extent influenced by this educational perspective because it's still about learning guided by others. It's about very intentional, goal-directed learning, and also oftentimes still disconnected from the real life. So based on that, we concluded that actually the observed age-related decline in growth work motives and work-related learning may be due to this criterion insufficiency. So that actually in the measures that we use, we miss these items that measure a non-educational way of learning. So this part of the project is sort of finished. So we published it in the Human Resource Development Review a month ago. But then we thought, okay, so now what? So now actually we want to maybe help improve how we measure these concepts. So what we then started was a follow-up study, and with the aim to really develop a new measure, trying to focus on this non-educational perspective. And we primarily wanted to focus on strengths and interests learning. And strengths refer to unique elements of the person that make this person at his or her best. So it's really about a within-person comparison, not necessarily between-person. And interests mainly refer to activities that people just enjoy doing and that they therefore want to put in time and energy. So we came up with this new concept. We call it strengths and interest learning, which refers to self-directed learning aimed at making better use of individual strengths and that also matches his or her interests. And then based on this conceptualization and based on this non-educational perspective on learning, we came up with 10 items to measure this concept. So you can see here items like, I would like to become even better at the task I already excel at, or I specialize more and more in tasks that I find interesting. And then the items in red, later on we had to kick them out. So that's why they are in red here. So in the end we had 6 items left. So what we of course wanted to do then in the next stage is try to validate this measure, or at least have a start with that. So we had a sample of more than 400 older workers. They worked through a temporary agency that's really focused on 65 plus people. So old age is pretty high, it's almost 70. Many males, highly educated, and they worked mainly, I would say, in white-collar positions. So we did exploratory and a confirmatory factor analysis with a random split of the data. And to look at convergent validity, we linked the new scale on the one hand to development and utilization crafting, which is about adjusting your job in such a way that you can develop your full potential, but also that you can do what you're good at and what you like doing, and related it also to the growth work motive scale. To determine divergent validity, we looked at job demands and exhaustion because we reasoned, well, it would not take too much time and effort to engage in this strengths and interest learning, so it would be unrelated to job demands and exhaustion. And finally, for criterion validity, we looked at work engagement, workability, and also person-job fit. So some preliminary results, I mean, we're still very much in the process here, but we did exploratory factor analysis. This looked actually quite good. But then, as I said, we did the confirmatory factor analysis, and we found that actually the 10-item scale didn't really work. So we continued with 6 items, which had good fit measures and also a good Konf alpha. So looking at the correlation, so you can see here that actually correlation with development and utilization crafting is quite okay. For growth motives, it's 0.30, and I think that makes sense because, well, we measure growth motives in a different way, so it would be weird if it would be too highly correlated. And there's no relationship between this strengths and interest learning and job demands and exhaustion, as we expected. And for the criterion validity, you can see here that there's some correlation with the outcomes measures, although it's not extremely high. So this is what we have so far. So maybe to share the big idea here is, of course, that older workers learn and develop differently than younger workers, and that we think we should develop more suitable measures to actually capture that. And next steps, well, we need to validate and measure much more and need to do much more work on it anyway, but I thought I'll share it here and see what you think of it. So it's very much work in progress. So all feedback is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay,
Questions now?
To speak into the microphone, or I have to speak up. So I'd like to invite questions or comments to Dorian's talk, please.
Yes. Hi. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so should I repeat the question or? No? Okay. So yeah, strength is not really about specific tasks or specific knowledge. It's more like these characteristics that you're good at. So for example, my #1 strength is that I'm a learner. So it's very general. I don't think it matters that much if you would have more of that strength because you can apply it in very different areas and in different ways. But I see your concern that by building only on what they already know, they might be too specialized, right? I think that's in the end what you're referring to. But I actually think that you could also just build on your knowledge base and then maybe apply it in a related field, for example. And then it's still a bit more close to what you're doing and what you're good at, but still you're also changing that knowledge or maybe improving that knowledge because you apply it in a different way. So it's a bit more incremental learning maybe. And I also think that if you build more on your strengths and what you know, that also provides some confidence and more self-efficacy, because that's also what we see, that older workers sometimes they don't participate in these training programs because it's a bit too scary and they feel less confident. So yeah, hopefully that would be less by measure it in such a way. But I see your point. Thanks. Oh. Mm-hmm. So I thought, yeah, I would be really curious about the age correlation. So you really see that this increases with age. I know your sample doesn't allow. Yeah, well, in this sample there was no correlation with age, but it's also a very limited sample. So that's why we need to collect more data to see that. And could you at least share the descriptives? So what was the mean value of this type of learning in the sample? I don't remember. I can look it up though. No, I did look at the correlation. Correlation there was not significant, was super small, but the mean, yeah, it's a good question. I will look it up. Yeah. Thanks.
I'm so sorry.
I wanted to draw your attention that we have a very fancy technology installed in front of you, so please use it.
Right?
Yes, maybe it's better just to use the microphone.
Yeah. Yep. Use the fancy thing. Oh, okay.
He pulled it all the way out, now it's sitting in his lap. He said to help the workers achieve their full potential, their own view of their potential, or their organization's view of their potential?
No, yeah, we measure it in a way that we ask them about their own strengths, right? So it's their view of their own potential, I think, yeah.
It might be interesting to look at what the organization thinks that they can accomplish.
Yeah.
The more formal versus informal of helping older workers attain something the organization thinks they can attain, but maybe they don't think they can.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting to look at. Although I also am a bit worrisome that sometimes supervisors are also, they have a sort of a bit of an age bias sometimes. So they might then not recognize all skills and strengths of these older workers. But I think it's indeed interesting to look at it from different perspectives and see, okay, what are they then good at? Yeah, thanks. Yes.
I thought this was super interesting. Thank you, Dorian. I wonder what are some of the outcomes you think you would use this type of measure for? Is it things like how much informal learning people do in a year, or is it, can you give a sense of what are some of the things you think it would predict, besides some of the things that you tested?
Yeah, in general, I think we want to measure whether older workers still learn. And that's the basic thing. And then, of course, in the next step, you would hope that would also relate to outcomes that indeed that we showed here. Yeah. You don't think we capture that with these items, or?
No, I do. I just was wondering, is it the correlation with age or the correlation with the outcome? So you expect that older people would be higher on this measure, and then, so it would be the mediator or something between?
Yeah, in that sense. Well, what we see now from the existing measures that then it all decreases with age. So I would actually hope that it would either not change with age or actually maybe improve with age, and that older workers would learn much more in this way compared to younger workers, and then that could lead indeed to these additional outcomes. But in this data set, it's just too limited age range to really look at that. So we need some follow-up. But yeah, that's what we would hope or.
I think think we have time for one more question.
Now?
Yeah.
Yes. Stand correctly. Right? It's the individuals. Those people who are 65 plus, who have experience in their job,
Yeah.
can know better themselves, working.
Yeah.
Think in research we did on a very different topic on adaptation, acculturation. If you ask different people, of course they have different views, and of course you don't have a high correlation. It's maybe between 0.3 and 0.4. So I think the constructs are different from what people describe themselves and what others describe.
Yeah.
This would be my answer to the point, is how
Yeah.
I think we're talking about different constructs.
Yeah, and what we would like to measure here is the learning of the individual. So from that perspective, so it is subjective, but we just think that with the current measures we have now, that all the workers would rate all these items very low because they just don't learn in that way, and therefore we think you would need different measures that you can capture it better, and then hopefully in the next step we could also see what kind of maybe work situation, HR practices, etc. could actually maybe stimulate that learning. Because now we think that we are not capturing their learning, so then it's very difficult to say something about it if you don't capture it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for all the comments.
I would now like to invite Ulrich Wallweih from the German Institute of Employment Research, who's going to talk about older workers' personnel reserve for increasing skill shortages. I don't know how we change PowerPoint presentations. Would you know? It's not. Oh.
Yeah, there should be a presentation.
There should be a presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you would be talking freely now, which I admire very much.
Yeah. It's this one over here.
Should I time you, or would you like me to give you an indication?
Yeah,
after
yeah,
10 minutes or 15, or what's
10, 15, yeah, 15.
15?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Let's see. I'm not so sure how to do like preview. Because it's PDF, right?
So how does it work? Yeah, well, it will be okay. I think, yeah, it should be okay. So, thank you very much for inviting me. The title of my presentation is Older Workers' Personal Reserve to Compensate Labor and Skill Shortages. The presentation deals with the current topic of the labor market policy debate in many countries. It will mainly refer to the German case, but it will at the same time put Germany in an international context. Now, what is the starting point? In many countries, labor and skill shortages are evident, and future demographic change will most probably aggravate the problem. Employing older workers is one of the promising options to facilitate the firm's acquisition and retainment of personnel. However, there is not a silver bullet available to tap this potential, but at least a set of sensible proposals. That might be the implication what the representative of the parliament says. Now let me go into the topic by showing something which is for economists very important, the Beveridge curve, here for the European Union. The Beveridge curve displays the relationship between the job vacancy rate and the unemployment rate. The curve can shift to the left and to the right. Shifts to the left indicate an improvement of the matching efficiency, shifts to the right a worsening. We may also observe movements on a given curve. That means observations in the northeast, this is over here, indicate a very tight labor market, whereas observations in the south east is just the opposite. So the labor market is not that tight. Now, what do we see here if we look at this graph? First of all, the financial crisis has decreased matching efficiency, what we see here for the European Union. That means because the beverage curve shifted to the right. In recent years, we also see something very interesting. If we look to this beverage curve here, we see that the movement was from the southeast to the northwest, which indicates that the labor market is now much more tight than it was 9 years ago. That means the fourth quarter of 2013 and the fourth quarter of 2022. Now, if we look at the recent past and at certain countries in particular, we observe significant changes. The labor markets in European countries were much tighter in 2022 compared to 2019, based on Eurostat data. And it is very interesting that in some countries we even recognize that the relationship between the vacancy and the unemployment rates was even higher than 1, indicating that the vacancy rate was higher than the unemployment rate. The vacancy rate was higher than the unemployment rate. And this is, for example, true for the Netherlands and for Germany. See these two columns. However, the chart also indicates that there are huge differences in European countries in this respect. The next question is therefore, are unfilled vacancies a problem? The answer is yes, they are. We have got a establishment survey and in which companies report concerning vacancies, and they report that due to unfilled vacancies, they were in many cases not able to serve their orders fully, or even had to reject orders. We see that here, that was indicated by 55 or 59% of companies for whom job vacancies were a problem. And this, of course, then leads to the question how additional labor supply can be generated. Three components are relevant in this context. First of all, of course, the demographic component. The demographic component is depending on the balance of the young entry cohort and the old exit cohort. And you all may also realize that age is of course an issue in this respect. Secondly, we have the behavioral component. So this reflects the changes in labor market participation by socio-demographic characteristics such as sex, age, and nationality. Again, we have age here as a very important issue. And finally, third component of labor supply is the migration component, and this is defined by the balance of inward and outward migration. That means there are several options available to influence labor supply, and they are partly related to age. Now let me go more into details, and as I mentioned at the very beginning, I would like to refer to the German case, at least to some extent. And what we see here is a more or less the composition of the working population by age groups and skill levels in Germany in the year 2019. And what we see here is if we compare different age groups, we realize that, for example, the group aged 20 to 24 years has a size of 4.4 millions, whereas the group, for example, of the 55 to 59 years old, the size is 6.7 millions. So what we realize here is that even if we would able to qualify the young cohort, 20 to 24, to a considerable extent, then even that would not replace the loss of skilled workers who are older. That is the main finding of this comparison. And that means also that the demographical change will probably, as I mentioned at the very beginning, aggravate the problem of skill and labor shortages in the future. And one option to address shortages is an increase in the employment of older workers. And now, what is the state of play in this context? In the international comparison, the employment rate of older workers, here the 55 to 64 years differ a lot. The highest rate is close to 80%, whereas the lowest rate is below 50%. The OECD average is at about 60%. We do find the highest shares, for example, in New Zealand, in Japan, and Sweden, and Norway, and also Germany is one of the leading countries in this respect. On the other hand, we have countries like Italy, Greece, and Luxembourg with lower employment rates of older workers. Now, if we then move to developments over time, we again see that almost in all Western countries, we do see an increase in the employment rates of older workers. But nevertheless, there are again differences. On the one hand, we have again the countries I mentioned earlier, like New Zealand, Sweden, and Japan, and even also Germany with a high increase of employment rates over time. That means between 1995 and 2022. And then there were other countries with a rather low increase, like Luxembourg, France, and Austria. Now, let me move to the oldest age group, that means the 65 plus, in selected countries. What we see here, I think, at the very first is that the employment rates of the 65 plus are much lower compared to the younger age groups. And we see also here remarkable differences between countries. We do realize that the shares, for example, in Sweden and the US are the highest, are well above the OECD average, whereas Germany in this case is below the OECD average. Okay, and this brings me now to the situation, or to the issue, what the situation in Germany is all about, if we have a closer look at certain age groups. First of all, the group aged 50 to 55 years, this is the more or less this blue curve here, is almost the same as the age group 25 to 49 years. That means over time, the group of 50 to 54 has reached the same level as the younger group. On the other hand, we look at the age group of 50 to 59 years, which is the dark blue curve, and the 60 to 64 years, which is the orange curve. They are lower than the other age groups, but the increase is remarkable. We look at the levels. We talk about 30 percentage points regarding the age group 55 to 59 and 40 percentage points regarding the age group 60 to 64 years. And women play an enormous role in this respect because also there were institutional changes over time. So women contributed very much to this development. This raises now the question what the drivers for increased employment rates were. And there is not a single explanation. research has identified several factors, and 3 areas are of relevance. First of all, the labor market situation and its development over time. There is this famous quote by John F. Kennedy, which says, "A rising tide lifts all boats." And that means, for example, if the labor market is improving, also older workers will be favored, but also younger workers will, of course, be favored. So this is this thing what Kennedy had liked to address. On the other hand, this is of course not the only explanation, and this can be shown if we look at Germany, because one may have expected that the pandemic may have disfavored also the labor market situation of older workers, which did not take place. So the pandemic has not lowered employment opportunities for older workers, although older workers were using mobile work less often than younger groups. And in contrast to the US, there are also no hints regarding a big quit in recent years, which would also be something which one could have in mind regarding older workers. That means there must be other explanations which are of relevance. So it could not only be the labor market situation and the development over time. A second important issue are, of course, institutional reforms, which influence incentives or even disincentives to work. So pension schemes are of importance regarding the retirement age, and also, of course, options for early retirement. And also the regulation of the unemployment and insurance and welfare benefits is of interest here as far as older workers are concerned. And what is also important if you have a deeper look at developments regarding older workers are changes in characteristics of jobs and workers. For example, regarding job requirements in terms of workload or stress. And also is of interest the labor market participation by gender and educational attainment over time. It makes a difference if, for example, women are in the labor market for a long time, or if they don't. So that makes a difference for their labor force participation when they are getting old. And educational attainment is also an issue. Skill level is very important. For example, if it changes over time regarding certain cohorts, then of course this also makes a difference. The state of health of the older population is an issue, and finally also types of employment are of importance. For example, as we know, self-employed are often, older workers are often represented in the group of self-employed. Okay, that is more or less a success story, but if we then look at the re-employment opportunities of older workers by gender, we see a little bit of a worry in this respect. If we again look at the German case, we can say that most of the increase in the employment rate of older workers was due to a lower rate of exits from the labor market, particularly a lower rate of early exits. So that is the main explanation for the increase. At the same time, and this is now here in this chart, it can be shown that it is very difficult for older workers to enter or re-enter the labor market when they have lost their employment. And the picture shows clearly the older workers are, the lower is their re-employment opportunity. And for women, as we see here, the probability is even lower than for men. So there is this issue which we also have to bear in mind. Now, what we conclude in order to answer the question how the potential of older workers can be tapped, I think that it is very important to see this issue as a triad. I think all parties here are involved and can contribute. So there are 3 issues which I think are of importance. One is the individual employability. Second issue is the job quality. And the third issue are institutional arrangement. And this is now the final chart. And I would just like to go in more details in this respect. First of all, of course, individual employability is an issue. And it consists on two issues. One is education and skills, and the other one is health. And in both cases, a preventive approach is very important in order to strengthen the position of older workers in the labor market. And the same is true regarding the development then. Continuous development with respect to education and skills and with respect to health would be of importance. The second issue is job quality, and here, of course, is a responsibility of organizations, of firms. So it will then include, for example, to address skills, competencies, and work preferences of old workers. So that is something which can then increase job quality. Second issue is to take particularly into account the age and aging of workers, and also the boost regarding occupational safety would also be something which then contribute to job quality at the end of the day. And finally, also institutional arrangements may make a difference in this respect. First of all, keeping and strengthening work incentives over the life course. Secondly, no subsidies for early retirement is also something we should tell the Parliament, which we have seen in many countries and which was always something which was really not really lead to a good outcome at the end of the day. What should we do with a statutory retirement age? I think what is very important is that it should refer to the development of life expectancy, but I think two issues are important. One is to focus on healthy years within the life expectancy, so one has to have a closer look at life expectancy. That is the first issue. And the other one is, of course, regarding professional strain, because working lives could, of course, differ very much, and one has to care for that. So that was it. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one or two questions.
Uli, thanks so much for your very interesting presentation. I would like to have two very brief comments and then a question that goes a little bit beyond your presentation. The first one, I'm still shocked how bad the re-employment numbers are for older people in Germany. And I'm just back from the Gerontological Society of America's meeting, and their ageism was a big topic. So are organizations ready for older people or aren't they? And I think the numbers show that they are probably not so much as we would probably like to see it. The second comment is on job quality. I believe the Later Life Workplace Index, and let me do some PR for our own work, could give you some answers of that, what job quality could look like, and what to look for. And then the third thing that goes beyond what you presented, but I think it's also relevant, especially when I look at the story that you started with jobs not having been completed, orders not having been accepted. I just looked into OECD numbers, and in Germany, people over the life course work 52,000 hours, roughly, a little less. In Lithuania, where we are, 59,000. In Sweden, where we are not, 61,000. And I mean, we just had numbers from Sweden. And in Estonia, which is really close to where we are now, 71,000. So that is a huge difference. Should we not discuss this issue, given the problems you raised in the first slide as well?
Okay, can I already answer? First of all, I think I was also shocked by the re-employment opportunities, because it it really does not go along with an increase of the employment rate on the other side. But there obviously is a difference regarding organizations if they already know their older workers or whether they do not know the older workers. And this is, of course, not only something which is which has to be bear in mind regarding organizations, but it has also to do, of course, with the search behavior of older workers. For them, of course, it might be of interest how far they could really keep their status over time. So that could also be a problem regarding their search behavior, or could also be due to, for example, institutional arrangements which allow them, for example, to have unemployment as a kind of a transitional period in order then to enter the pension scheme. So things like that are, I think, are very, very important to look at. Regarding your final question, of course, you are completely right that the average hours of German workers are rather low. This is not only true with respect to their working life, but also with respect to their yearly working hours. And this has to do with a large proportion of part-time employment, which of course then lowers the average. And the question is, of course, how far we can tap this potential. As we know from a lot of surveys, there are workers who would like to work more, on the one hand, especially part-time workers. But there are also sometimes regulation, like, for example, the marginal part-time employment. We know that workers would like to work more, but what they have in mind is that, for example, that also the net income should increase, but it won't. You have to earn then a lot more in order to keep your net income, because then taxes and social security contributions come in. So that is, of course, something we can deal with, but it's, of course, at the end of the day, a political decision. So this is the one thing. On the other hand, we also know that there are workers who say, well, I would also like to shorten even my working hours, and these are mostly full-time employment with very long hours. For them, obviously, the preference is to work less, but you are completely right. We cannot only look at numbers and persons. We also have to look at working hours. And this is also something which we have to tackle in this respect and have to deal with, that incentives are also there in order to increase working hours. This is something which could also contribute in order to tap the potential and to address the demographical change.
Okay. Yes, last question.
Thank you very much, Rafael from Israel. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I have a small question. Is there an upper age limit for working? I understand that you checked 65 plus, but is there an upper limit for working in your data, or according to your understanding?
Well, there is, when I say 65 plus, there's of course not an upper limit, so to say, but there is, in many countries, you have a statutory retirement age. This then allows you to receive pensions, but there is no kind of, there is no kind of restriction to work longer, even longer. That means beside your pension, you can, of course, stay in the labor market. And I think this is something which is, I mentioned the data, is not very common to work even longer than the statutory retirement age, but we see a certain growth in this respect over time. And the question would be, in my point of view, not only to look at the retirement age as such, but also to increase the flexibility for workers to work even longer, and also to increase the incentive to work longer. For example, this could, for example, even improve their pension. That would be, for example, a regulation which, in my point of view, from an economist's point of view, would make sense. Could you speak, please, into the microphone?
Thank you for the presentation. So if I understood correctly, especially employment rates of older women are higher. And I was wondering whether you have some information about the reasons behind that. So to anticipate that, my hypothesis would be that there might be more gaps in retirement contributions of women due to raising children and these obligations. So there might be simply a financial need to stay employed for a longer time. You have any insights on that?
Yeah, there are, I think, two main arguments, at least in the German case, and this may also refer then to other countries. First of all, women are more now visible regarding older ages in the labor market, because for them it is, for the group now entering the old age group, it's much more common to work even in younger years. So you see this kind of, there's a certain kind of past dependency. And what we also see in the Scandinavian countries, there, for example, the employment of women is something which is rather usual, which is rather common. And for that reason, the probability that women are still in the labor market in their older years, this is something you can really then observe there. And this is now, I think, something which has also then affected Germany in recent years. So this is the first answer. But there's another answer, and this has to do with the statutory retirement age. Until, I think, 2010 or 2011, the statutory retirement age for women was lower than for men. Today I talked to somebody from Lithuania where this difference is still in place. That means, I think I heard something like 64 for men and 62 for women, which is not anymore the case in Germany. So we have now the same statutory retirement age for women and for men. And this also had, of course, an impact on the participation rates. I think this is the second most important issue in this respect.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the final presentation of this session is by Sanjeeva Pereira, if I pronounced that correctly, and I think you've had the longest way to Lithuania. You're coming from the University of Southern Australia, so this, I think, beats most of our travel time. Sanjeeva is presenting on the topic, you can lead a horse to water, ... and I'm interested in finding out what you can do with the horse at the water, but leveraging managers' communication to support older workers. So thank you very much. Should I time your presentation and give you an indication after how many, 15 minutes or 10 minutes? 15?
15 would be great. Needs your magic touch. And then navigate from here. Yeah. Perfect. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Sanjeeva Pereira, but everybody calls me Sanji, so if that's easier. So as you said, I'm from University of South Australia Centre for Workplace Excellence. So I've come from end of spring, long days in blue skies and warm days. So it's a big big change. So my co-author is Max from LMU, Germany, and one of my PhD students, Julia Anna, also from Center for Workplace Excellence. When I was prepping the presentation, I didn't realize I would be up here at a lectern, and you'll be down there. So I have notes to say that instead of leaving my questions to the last, that I would have 2 strategic pauses, because what I'm presenting is a project that we're just getting off the ground. We're doing some exploratory work, so your feedback would be really useful for us to kind of look at the next design stages of the project. So I'll still do my pauses, but if you don't get to do that interaction, I'd love to hear your thoughts during a tea break or over the next couple of lunch break or over the next couple of days. So the focus here for us in this project is looking at how older workers or mature age workers embrace technology, and how organizations can support them to embrace technology and learn and adapt and this is kind of summarizes, I think, how older workers can feel, and I'll explain that in a minute. A lot of the time, there's a lot of technology changes at the moment, and you probably have seen it over the last 6 months. It's with artificial intelligence and all that stuff's happening in the workplace. The quantity of change and the pace of change has been quite fast, and that actually creates a challenge for older workers. They have pressure to keep up with technology. The research suggests that they need to update their skills to remain employable. And we were talking about difficulty of getting back into employment. We do know that for older job seekers, this is a challenge. And if you do not update your technology skills, you can get actually locked out of the labor market, because if you get out of the labor market, you'll find it even additional challenge if your technology skills are not up to date. So if that was the situation, we were talking about what organizations can do in the previous presentation. So how can we get older workers to embrace technology and stay in the workforce? In research on diversity and inclusion, there's a strong body of research around this idea of identity-conscious practices. So the idea is that you can have good human resource practices which are identity-blind, which means that those practices apply to everybody in the organization. So it could be that there are job descriptions for everybody in the organization. There's a fair and structured promotion process. So those practices, which are more like high-performance work practices that apply to all employees. On the other hand, diversity research suggests that you could have another bucket or another category of practices called identity-conscious practices. This is where an organization looks at a particular group and decide that they have unique needs, and we are going to address their unique needs by adopting specific practices. So in workplaces, in relation to older workers, this might look like age-friendly practices like phased retirement, reverse mentoring. And in terms of technology change and embracing that technology change, training to update their technology-related skills. So diversity research would suggest that when an organization adopts this kind of identity-conscious practices, they're sending a very strong signal to older workers in their organization saying, you're valued. We understand you have unique needs, and we want to address those needs. But research also suggests that sometimes, particularly when it comes to accessing technology-related support, or revealing or discussing with the organization what kind of accommodation or what kind of changes you need to do for your work to be able to remain employable, older workers are quite reluctant to access such support. They're not willing to tell the organization, and for good reason. We know about ageism and discrimination, what kind of accommodation that they need. In fact, there's some research that suggests that some older workers would avoid embracing technology change and choose to retire early instead. And I'm just quoting here. I'll talk a little bit more about the exploratory work we've done, and this is from an interview that we did in Germany that kind of supported this other study I've cited at the bottom that confirms that, how hard it is for older workers to ask for accommodations for additional support. So the managers think that, they don't say what they need, so we don't know how to help them. And we think that this might be happening because technology support or requesting any kind of accommodation is almost like an ideal stereotype threat-inducing incident. Stereotype threat is this idea that if you're from a minority group, you're conscious or you are aware that there might be negative stereotypes about you and your group, that are almost like in the air. So you kind of recognize they're in part of your work context, part of your where you are. And something then happens in the workplace, a situational cue maybe, that increase that salience of that negative stereotype and then has impact on how employees react to those. So in the short term, when an employee experiences stereotype threat, it can reduce their performance. In the long term, when an employee experiences stereotype threat at a chronic level, it can reduce their engagement, they move away or try to de-identify from that domain. So we feel that awareness, this technology adoption or having to take up or being asked to take additional training or update their technical skills could be almost like a perfect scenario in which older workers are likely to experience stereotype threat. Because there are negative stereotypes around older workers, that they are less technology savvy. And we were looking at the first presentation today that there's some research that they're less trainable, but we might not have been measuring that accurately at this stage. So there's that. So older workers are aware of these negative stereotypes. So then when they have to make a request or when they have been asked to take some training or adapt, update their skills, the fact that they have to ask or adhere to that request, that can be like, putting my hand up saying, actually, I don't know what's happening, I'm not very tech savvy, and it's like there's a stigma of incompetence. So it's like a perfect storm of a stereotype threat-inducing event. So what we wanted to understand is, if that was the case, can we use line managers as key influencers in this process? Because some of the organizational communication that comes to older workers, often what's the most important and most relevant to older workers, come from their line managers. And research, particularly in work-life practices, flexible work arrangements, and so on, suggests that line managers can be interpretative filters. So they're the ones who interpret organizational level practices to older workers to say, hey, that's a good idea, or don't do that, that's just head office telling you to do something. So can we use that communication? Can there be key messages, signal sense givers in this process? So at this stage, we've done some exploratory work. We've done about 9 interviews with managers of large organizations in Germany. Most of the organizations have over 100,000 employees. And we wanted to understand, how do you talk to older workers about wanting to, how do we help you to provide you the accommodations, particularly in relation to technologies-related changes. We also did a prolific survey of about 70 managers, where we provided them a vignette. We gave them a scenario in which they have to ask an older worker to take up some technology-related training. And we got them to draft an email to that older worker. But the most interesting data for us came actually not from the email. After the email was written, we also asked them to tell us what were the points that you used in your email to persuade these older workers to adopt this technology training. We're at the moment doing a series of focus groups in Australia with managers who supervise older workers. So what we find in this data that is often line managers as key influencers, they're uncertain about how to approach the conversation. In fact, some of the other work that I have done in Australia, the R word is almost like at the F word. It's like people don't want to talk about the retirement, and and it from both sides. It's like employees don't want to bring it up, managers don't want to bring it up either. So they don't know how to approach that conversation. And often the default is not to talk to older workers at all, kind of skirt around the issue. So we wanted to understand when an organization has to adopt some type of technology support, like technology training, related training, which can be the stress of stereotype threat-inducing effect, which can lead to audible reactions, can the line manager communication, any type of framing that the line manager uses in terms of presenting that initiative, presenting that practice, whether that can make a difference as to whether the older workers will adopt or embrace that training or that program, or whether they'll reject it. So this was going to be one of my strategic pauses slides. When we look at the diversity research, it talks about, we can see that the line managers could do the framing in two ways. First is about this idea of productivity. So saying, this training is really good because, I want you to do this training, update your technology skills because it will improve your productivity, you'll become more efficient. And we think that it's likely that if a manager frames an initiative that way, that it'll reduce stereotype threat and will have positive reaction from the older worker. On the other hand, diversity research also suggests that managers can frame the same practice in remedial terms. So it is to say that actually you didn't grow up with technology, you're probably not familiar with social media, so you're deficient, we need to fill you up, so you need to go to this training. So we think that framing is likely to increase stereotype threat, and older workers, more likely to react negatively to those initiatives. The third one is stereotype threat literature suggests there might be an option for a challenge frame, in the sense that you frame the initiative as a challenge. So I believe in you. This is a challenging thing. You should think of it as a challenge to learn this new technology. Another thing that came up, when we looked at our prolific data and our interview data, we do see those first two frames quite often. Another one that we're not sure would work is this, what we would call the diluting type of frame. This is where a manager said that they didn't want to refer to age at all. They, instead of saying, in fact, in our vignette, we said, you want to ask these older workers to go to this training. Several managers said, even though it's not, I kind of hinted at that the whole team has to do the training, even though it's only this person who has to do this. So they were diluting the focus on old workers. They're kind of saying it's a whole team thing. So I'll pause here. I'm not sure how we're doing for time.
12 minutes, so you still have each.
Okay, so I'll pause here, and I wanted to seek your input as to whether you think there could be other frames that we could be looking at, other ways of framing this. I'll go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Yes. So I haven't finished.
You haven't finished?
No.
Oh! Did you say a pause here?
No. But should I finish? I've got a few slides on.
I thought you said you'd finished.
No.
One thing I might suggest is, two things actually. One is maybe asking or thinking about how the new skill would relate to what they already know. So if they're already workers working in the organization, to kind of think about like framing it as something that's connected to that, so it doesn't seem completely novel, because I think it's the complete novelty of something new that would be a problem. I mean, if it is completely novel, then that doesn't obviously work. The other thing is that the age targeting would be problematic. I know, like in the US, just these, like you can't offer training or opportunities to some groups of people based on characteristics that aren't necessarily work-related. So those more diluted strategies would probably be those that, would be recommended in those types of situations. And we've also done things like, it didn't work, but framing as, you know, kind of a generative, like here you're going to get skills so you can connect with people, et cetera, et cetera. We did that frame and looked for age differences and interest in training, and that didn't work, so FYI.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Livy.
Hi. Hi, thank you. Really interesting project. I was just thinking about the salience of the group when the older person is approached. So first of all, I was thinking about the age of the manager compared to the person. So if the manager is a similar age to the older person, then that dynamic of older, younger, so that the age difference may not be so salient to them. And also if in the framing some kind of superordinate identity was mentioned, then this might take away the salience for the older person of them being an older worker. So maybe stress that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe a frame more like that it's actually personally meaningful for them in a way, or that it actually helps them. So yeah, I was thinking last week with the department we did a session on ChatGTP and how it can actually help you make your work more fun and et cetera, et cetera. And I think maybe those frames would help for older workers to pick it up.
Thank you. So I'll move to my next one. This is related to the first feedback that I got. It's about co-worker reaction. So on the one hand, we wanted to understand how can managers present this to older workers, but we also wanted to understand how will co-workers react if will they support their older workers to embrace technology? So in one of the organizations I recently collected data, they had, this organization had lots of different services, but one of the services was providing roadside service. And they moved digital to sending all of the information related to all of their work through to their employees through their mobile phones. And they had and this is an older work profile, and when they were trained, older workers said, yes, we got the training. And instead of then telling their managers about what they didn't understand, they were asking their co-workers, who were younger co-workers, hey, you know, I don't know how to do this on the mobile, can you do this? So I think there is, like, when this happens, it doesn't happen in vacuum. So there are co-workers who also might be affected. And particularly if they see that their older workers are getting different types of training, or they're being asked to do some training, it can lead to some reactions. Particularly research on ideals, for example, suggests that that's the challenge. How do you kind of treat older workers, everybody equally, but also at the same time differently? And the fact that you're actually targeting one group can create reaction from the other co-workers, and most of the time that reaction can be shaped or can be influenced by the rationale provided to the other co-workers as to why some person is getting a particular type of access to a particular type of training. So we wanted to then understand, again, could the line manager communication frames have an impact on this? Because when an employee is targeted or is told that older workers that they have to update their technology skills or they have to do their training, this can activate, and when the other co-workers find out, this can activate the age stereotype. So we do know that stereotype content model suggests that we look at people based on these two dimensions of warmth and competence. And as people get older, we look at them as more warm and less competent. So that might be that, you know, when the way that an older worker is being asked to update their technology skills can change the way that their co-workers perceive them in terms of particularly along those two dimensions. So if you were to, again, kind of think about how the older workers, how the managers can frame this, if they frame the initiative as, you know, we're helping X, Y, Z, the older workers to increase their efficiency and productivity. This is likely to maybe reduce age stereotypes. They might increase the perception of competence because now the organization believes in these employees, and then may lead to positive co-worker reactions. On the other hand, if the manager presents the initiative as something remedial, you know, these people, they didn't grow up with technology, they need to update their skills, maybe, you know, that reduces those perceptions of competence among the co-workers, which might lead to negative reaction from the co-workers. I've put a question mark there because we also looked at some of the research that's coming actually around employees with disabilities, about this idea of remedial or accommodations provided to employees with disability. And some of our interview data kind of showed us a glimpse of that sometimes when a manager frames the initiative as something that that is needed, that's addressing a need of a particular group, co-workers actually respond positively. So I'm not sure whether we would see that getting played out here. So in terms of when an employee has a disability, and if the line manager says, you know, this person has a disability, they have a great need, the co-workers are more likely to show empathy and support an employee with a disability. So we kind of saw in some of our interview data where managers were using, so this is an example of an organization where the manager was giving all of the day shifts to the older workers, and the other employees had to do the night shift. And when the other employees confronted the manager to say, like, you know, how come, you know, old X, Y, and Z, they never get to do the night shift, their approach was to say, you know, we really don't want to have what they have health issues, so this manager was evoking empathy and, you know, pity to try to kind of manage the situation. So we wondered whether that kind of framing could have an impact in the on co-worker reactions to the ways that managers frame training initiatives. So that's all I have, and I look forward to your feedback during breaks, and if you have any other ideas about how to finish this part of the project. Our plan is to collect experimental data, so would love to know a little bit more about your ideas about the frames.
Sorry about the misunderstanding earlier.
No, that's okay.
I think we've got time for one or maybe two questions, short ones, because I think there's a little agenda change and I need to reconfirm with Bernadetta, but I think if there's one or two questions, we've got time for that.
I'll just make a quick suggestion. I would think that the way the supervisor frames it would have some effect like on the organization's climate, and that might affect co-worker reactions directly rather than just mediated through age. So I would kind of expect there to be a direct link as well as an indirect link.
Yeah, I think you're right. We've actually seen this in studies with age, like climate around climate, and also accommodation climate on research on employees with disabilities. Their likelihood to request and reach, yeah, absolutely right. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I think there's a slight change of plans to have our tea break now, not for half an hour, but for 15 minutes to catch up with our agenda. So thank you very much to all presenters in our first session today. Thank you for all the questions, discussion points. And I think tea is waiting outside, and coffee as well is waiting outside. Thank you. Sorry, I thought you said I'm finishing now.
Yeah, I said pauses, and then I said
And because it was 12 minutes, I thought it was surprised, because I thought it's going to be 15 minutes, and normally people speak longer, so I was a little bit surprised myself. Yeah. Do you work with Carol Kulik?
Yes.
Yes, I saw her book, of course, on line managers and HR.
Right.
Yeah. I teach HR to global business students who are going to be line managers at some stage. So I use this narrative of line managers as HR with HR functions in my
very
course.
good.
I haven't used her book, but I'm planning on using it moving forward.
Have you
in
got
my
a copy?
classes.
Because I can send you one.
I'd love one, actually. I don't have one. I don't have one.
Okay, I'd send you one. I'll post it.
This would be excellent. I don't have a business card with me, but I can send you. I think I've got.
Can I take a?
Yeah, of course.
Is that okay?
And I use got a difficult last name, so Schroeder, I normally spell it without the E. It's the German umlaut, it's O and two dots. So.
Okay, cool. I'll send you a copy.
Excellent.
She'll
Thank you
be
so much.
delighted to know.
Oh, your institute is amazing. And,
and she'll be delighted to know that you're using it in her class.
Yes.
Yeah, because I use it in my class too.
And it's so timely because of course line managers have had HR responsibility for a long time, but they've taken not undervalued, but
Thank you so much for getting up. Also, hi. Oh.
Very long. Can I share the screen just for trying it out?
Sure.
Does it work? Okay. Stop share. Okay. I have 3 slides. 3 minutes, please. 3 slides. There's Alexandra, I think. Still having breakfast, yeah? Mhm.
There it is, okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Justin Marcus, and this is Susan Scheibe. We are the Action Chair and Vice Chair, respectively, of this project that we're going to introduce to you all today, Cost Action CA22120, a European network to leverage the multi-age workforce. First of all, for those who are wondering, what exactly is a cost action? COST, the acronym stands for European Cooperation in Science and Technology. It's funded by the European Commission, the EC. It's actually the oldest research program that's funded by Europe. It's currently in its 51st year. And it's very research focused. Unlike a lot of other types of projects, they're not really too interested in technical reports or white papers. What they want is focus on scientific publications, international collaborations, and societal impact. The aim of cost actions are to grow a science in a particular area, for example, work and aging, by bringing together scientists and practitioners across Europe and their international partners. COST is founded on several major principles, 4 major principles. Firstly, the COST Association is strongly committed to scientific excellence and inclusiveness. So the focus is on advancing scientific output in Europe and beyond. And then it is strongly committed to openness and inclusiveness. So cost actions are open networks that any qualified person is free to join in and participate as much as they wish. There is no minimal obligatory amount of participation, right? You can join in, you can participate as much as you'd like for the duration of the actions. The actions last for 4 years. Our action officially started this November, so it'll run until the end of October 2027. The COST Association is highly committed to inclusiveness. This includes a firm commitment to gender balance, to ensuring geographical diversity across all of Europe, with a particular focus on researchers and innovators across the career stage, both young and advanced professionals. And COST is very much bottom up. It is, there was Freudian slip. The decision-making process is very democratic, input from members from across all of COST member countries. The member countries, as you can see, the core of COST are the 41 COST full member countries. Those are the ones that are shaded in pink. That includes all of Western Europe and all of Eastern Europe. And then there's one COST cooperating member, Israel, and there's one COST partner member, South Africa. There are also 11 near neighbor countries in cost actions. This includes all the countries highlighted in green. All the rest of the countries that are recognized by the United Nations are considered to be third states or international partner countries. So anyone residing in any of these countries is free to join and participate in a cost action should they wish. What does COST fund? Right, so it funds for 4 years. The funding is allocated year by year. Funds do not carry over from 1 year to the next, so spend it or lose it. The main fundings are used to facilitate travel to and organization of meetings, conferences, both organizing and attending conferences, training schools, short-term scientific missions, dissemination activities, for example, websites, social media, open access publications, and also recently, in the last few years, they added virtual networking grants. to put it simply, you can think of the action as a facilitator, right? So it's not one particular research topic or whatever, right? Because work and aging, include all aspects of work and aging, right? So the goal of the action is to bring smart, motivated people, such as yourselves, into the room together to create scientific output and societal impact. We are merely facilitating your collaborations. That's what the action does. Now, the leverage action, in particular, the grand aim is to build a pan-European and multi-stakeholder network that is focused on the psychological and management aspects of work and aging. Ours is actually the first cost action that is so focused. The goal is to advance, share, and promote knowledge and implementation of evidence-based practices to fully leverage the aging and multi-age workforce and enhance the well-being, productivity, and prosperity of individuals, organizations, and societies. These are the grand aims. The action expects to do this by specifically focusing on 5 working groups. So we aim to expand science and practice on work and organizational practices for an age-diverse workforce, successful aging at work for workers of different demographics, knowledge transfer between generations and the integration of age-diverse workers at work, aging and technology at work, and late careers and retirement. With this grand aim in mind, over the next 4 years, we have a number of objectives. Firstly, we have the research coordination objective. So what do we aim to achieve with the action? We aim to identify and refine research questions relevant to the role of age in the workplace, with a particular focus on national and societal cultural contexts, to identify mechanisms and moderating factors and increase crosstalk between multiple disciplines and stakeholders, to help facilitate large-scale, cross-sectional, longitudinal and/or intervention studies on workplace aging using the multiplicative effort of the network, to create and disseminate consensus documents with regard to all of that which I just mentioned, to establish priorities for the next generation of research on work and aging, to stimulate innovative ideas and the establishment of consortia to compete for competitive funding, focused on work and aging through a work and organizational psychology or human resource management lens, and to promote science-based best practices for practitioners to help provide tools for organizational, career, and/or occupational health management, and ultimately to promote tools and strategies that are aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to help, adjusting the new emerging situation at work for people of different ages. These are the research coordination objectives. I'm now going to yield the floor over to Susan to talk a bit more about the capacity building objectives.
Yeah, hi everyone. As Justin said, so we have research coordination as one of our grand aims with this action. And then the other grand aim, if you will, is capacity building. And for capacity building, we also formulated a number of objectives. And the first one is that we would like to further develop, I should say, an integrative scientific network where we're trying to be a bit more systematic about who we invite, right? So this network is very much bottom up, but we were thinking it would be good to also think about, what are the countries that are underrepresented, what are maybe the disciplines that are underrepresented, so kind of stretch out to a bit more systematically to build this integrative scientific network. Next is to bring together academics from ITC countries. ITC, we had to learn a lot of abbreviations, so I can imagine that is a bit confusing if you first hear about those, but ITC stands for Inclusiveness Target Countries, so these are the countries which are part of the affirmative action of the EU. So for example, a lot of, Lithuania is one of them, that should get a special boost with this initiative. So bringing together academics, but also the stakeholders so that we can co-create research, that we can become research partners. Another objective is to create opportunities for interdisciplinary exchange and cooperation. So making it more easy to know who's interested in a certain topic, who's an expert, who is a stakeholder that is relevant, and then be able to reach out to these people. Another objective is to come up with an online platform. So we're envisioning a website which should become the to-go place if you want to know something about work and aging in Europe and beyond Europe. So yeah, we could register and disseminate ongoing research initiatives and outputs. Also, we envision that we develop a science practitioner online database where we put together all these measures that we develop, maybe video tutorials, so material that can be used by practitioners in order to utilize all the evidence that we collect. And then in terms of capacity building, of course, we should not forget our young colleagues and scholars. So an objective is to develop the skills of young researchers and professionals, that they also get practice in science practice dialogue, in translating practice to science, and vice versa, research to practical applications. We would like to develop the next generation of researchers. So first of all, make more young researchers interested in the topic of work and aging, and help them develop expertise on it through different mechanisms such as training schools, dissemination conferences, so-called short-term scientific missions. That's another jargon term that we had to learn. So that basically means that we can finance short research visits of 1 month or 2 months of young researchers with more senior researchers in the network. And develop a sustainable way of disseminating scientific knowledge for, beyond academics, so for practitioners and citizens, for example, through our website that we envision. The structure of the action is basically, are the 5 topics that Justin mentioned earlier. So we created a work group for each of these 5 topics, and everyone who is becoming part of this action can choose to join one or more of these working groups. So that's where the actual action happens. So the conceptual work, the communication between ourselves. And well, we think it is wise to not choose too many working groups. So 1 or 2 is probably optimal because, well, SOC theory tells us that selection and optimization is a good way to go about your research. And, well, all 5 working groups also have an interdisciplinary character. So when we defined our goals, we said that we would like to be the action on the psychology and management aspects of work and aging. So you will see in each of the working groups, the first 2 disciplines that are relevant are work organization and personnel psychology and human research management. But each of the working groups then has additional disciplines that are relevant to the topic at hand. So for example, well, working group 1, work and organizational practices, we would also have social psychology, occupational health psychology, or if you take working group 5, retirement, you see there's also sociology and economics listed. So these are, we think, the disciplines that are most important to work on that topic, in addition to psychology, organizational psychology, and HRM. Okay, in terms of the structure, where are we? We just began, as Justin said. So the action was launched mid-October in Brussels, and it officially started 1st of November. And it's open, as Justin said, so we have people indicating their interest to join on an ongoing basis. Where we stand right now, and this is very up to date because Justin is so much on top of things. These are the countries that we have at this moment, so where we have management committee members and confirmed work group applications. And you can see, all of Europe is colored green, more or less. So most of the European countries are already in our action. And we have a few more countries shaded in light red where we still have to discuss if the people really fit with our goals. And there you see a few light yellow countries. So this is where we don't yet have any members. So if you know anyone who is working on our topics from these yellow shaded countries, please invite them to join. Okay, going beyond Europe, you can see where we are right now in terms of our near neighbor countries, international partner countries. Again, yeah, Europe is colored red, so most of Europe is in the action, but also we are very fortunate to have participants from the green countries, if you will, the US, Brazil, Australia, China. So yeah, we are grateful that we have also kind of a good reach across the world. Then in terms of who are the people who are kind of doing all the action at the moment, or who are kind of trying to coordinate the action. We have a really nice group of core leadership holders. So Justin and I are the action chair and vice chair. And then next to that we have a grant holder, scientific representative. So, sorry, this is Justin as well. So this is just where the financial matters happen. But we have a science communication coordinator, Ines, who I think is also here. So Ines will help us with social media, webpage construction, and these kind of things. We have a grant awarding coordinator who is not here, Kalina, from North Macedonia. And then each of the work groups have a leader, so you can see the person who you can talk to or you can contact if you're interested in a particular work group. So it's Doreen for the HRM practices for multi-age workforce, Donald for successful aging at work, Ulrike for the social, the interrelational aspects and knowledge exchange, Benedetta for aging and technology, and then Zara for the retirement-related work group. We have a few more people who we are very fortunate to have on board. So each work group also has a vice leader. So these are also people you can, of course, approach and talk to. I will not go through all of them here, but you can see next to the work group vice leaders, we have also someone who is is an exchange coordinator, so a person who is supposed to help with exchange between the different work groups. We have an impact or translational officer, Jürgen. We have a young researcher and innovator coordinator, Slavka from the Czech Republic, and an ITC coordinator, so the Inclusiveness Target Country coordinator, that's Maria from Ukraine. And you will note that some of these names are familiar to you and others are not, are new. And that is exactly also the idea of this action, that we are kind of reaching out beyond the current group and also with an eye on a balance. So a balance in terms of gender, a balance in terms of young versus senior investigator, which type of country people are coming from. So these types of, and old and new. So people who were on the original proposal versus people who joined the action later. Okay, then let me say a few words about very concretely, that's my second last slide, very concretely what the funding looks like for this current year. So as Justin said, every year we have to make a work and budget plan. So for now, we only made a plan for the first year. And so we have funding for about 80 participants and local organizer support to visit these meetings, these working group meetings. We have plans for training schools, but not for the first year, so we thought it is more sensible to start these in year 2. And then we have 4 grants of 2,000 euros each for this fancy term, short-term scientific mission. So short research visits at partners in the network. We also have a few conference grants, so that help us disseminate word on the action at other conferences, not our own conference. And we have some funding for logo and website design. The virtual networking grants, we have not made any plans yet. That is something to consider for the second year. But that's kind of what the funding looks like for this year. And then, well, Justin knows all about the funding mechanism for the following years, but they do depend on the number of countries we have and that we fulfill the inclusiveness criteria in terms of balancing these different groups. Okay, so we are presenting this, of course, because, well, the idea for this cost action started at this meeting a few years ago. It took us some time to get it approved, 3 rounds it took us to get this action funded. And we very much hope that, yeah, most, if not all of you, would be interested in joining and helping us to, really get active, do the work, get together, and achieve the objectives that we formulated. What can you do if you're interested? Well, we would recommend you that you go to our website, which is listed there. You can also just Google cost action leverage, and then you will get there very easily. And you will find a rather lengthy PDF document, which is called the Memorandum of Understanding. That is basically a short version of the proposal that we submitted. So it has all our plans, the background, the description of the working groups, and everything that we envision in terms of the activities. And then you can officially apply to become a member of one or more of the 5 working groups. Thank you.
Questions, anybody?
Yeah.
Yes, so for the first year, the goal is minimally 1 scientific publication, right? Actually, I think officially the goal was 2, right, for the first year, and then, and then it staggers. So like we're hoping to have, say, 40 over by the end of year 4. Now that sounds ambitious, but then think of it this way, right? The action facilitates travel to those meetings, to those conferences and all that. So if you were to eventually publish a paper that was, discussed in one of those meetings or conferences, then you would cite, or not cite, acknowledge the action as one of the sources of funding. See, so that's why cost actions actually have very high scientific impact. The average cost action has over 40 scientific publications within a few years of its lifetime. Yeah, actually I think for the end of year 4, we had like 30, I think that was the goal, or something like that. But that's totally doable if you think about it. At this point, we have 93 participants. And about 88% of that 93 are researchers. And then, of course, we have some 12% practitioners. Yeah. So that's publication is one measure. Another measure could be grants won. And one thing that cost action, the cost association values a lot are ERC grants. So while cost action cannot explicitly be used for another ERC grant, the action is more than happy to facilitate meetings that can help lead to collaborations of those grants, right? So the action measures success in terms of publications, in terms of research and practitioner collaborations created, in terms of grants and all those things. So for the first grant period, we had a set of 8 goals, and these are all very realizable goals. For example, have at least 2 conference presentations, right? Easy, right? So low bar for the first year, right? But yeah, we are quite confident that we can easily, we can meet these goals, and then that's how we concretely measure success. Right? Thanks for the question. Well, for the first year, we have planned for the creation of an action website and newsletter. And so we are hoping to, in short order, put together a science communication task force that Ines would be leading to help do this. Yeah, and also there are stakeholders, meaning practitioners, in all 5 working groups. So at these meetings, it wouldn't just be us professors, it would also be stakeholders there. So that helps enable direct transfer of knowledge, transfer of best practices in that regard too. By the way, one point I want to mention is that the cost association tends to prioritize funding for the countries in the greater European research area, which they define as all those countries in pink and green that you saw. And so for our partners in international countries, for example, the United States, the rules are the funding is more limited. So for example, we have working group meetings for 4 years, right? So we aim to fund each, we would like to fund each person to at least one of these meetings per year. But then for international partners, we can only fund them once over the 4 years, right? So only 25% of what we could fund someone from Europe. Now, it does not mean you cannot participate. Everyone is free to participate in as much as they like if they can self-fund, right? So there are some constraints to what we can do, but everyone is more than welcome to join. Funding aside, the goal of the action is ultimately to help burgeon the science of work and aging.
Just wanted to make a comment in line with this morning conversation at the PhD workshop about crafting your researcher identity, and we discussed how to dig into the aging research interests. So I'm really interested in the 5 subgroups that you have here, because back to the conversation we had this morning, I'm thinking like this would be a great way of like framing a more specific aging research interest. And I was just curious how you came up with the 5, or if there was any discussion or one that you think may be missing, or I don't have specific thought about it, but I'm curious about the process.
Yeah, great question. Actually, those 5 topics, and Sarah could probably fill in as well, came out of the AWM 4 years ago in St. Gallen. Oh, St. Gallen, right? Yeah. Where, well, looking at the program that we had 4 years ago, we felt, well, these are the topics where we are active in, so there seems to be an interest. But then we also thought beyond that, and we thought about, what are also topics that we are not yet active enough in. And so, for example, the aging and technology is a topic where we felt, well, this is really up and coming, and practitioners, media, all of them are getting a very much an interest in that topic, but we are not doing sufficient research on that. So we also added that to the list. And then we also discussed, what is the uniqueness, and try to, for example, put in a temporal perspective. So if you, like the first work group, HRM practices, that's more kind of for the present. So you have a multi-age work group, workforce, how do you deal with them? But then successful aging at work, that really has this long-term perspective. So that's really about, looking over time, what are early career predictors, mid-career predictors of late career outcomes, for example. So it was this mixture of a bottom-up and top-down approach. Okay. Well, we hope to see you all at the activities. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Ich bin auf einer Doktorandenschule und musste mich jetzt auf eine Toilette verziehen. Ich hoffe nicht, dass ich
Macht es da, was du da deinen Hintergrund zu manipulieren?
Can you hear us? We can hear you.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. I thought it was still offline. Sorry. No. Well, now everybody knows.
No, just the last second. So, okay. All right. I think So I think that the sound works, right? Maybe just to double check. Alexandra, can you please check or say something to be sure we can hear you?
Hi, nice to see you, even though it's online remotely.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm here too. You hear me?
Perfectly, thank you so much. Okay, so let's start and welcome everyone to this panel discussion on rethinking uncertainty and age in the new era of work. So the motivation to organize this panel discussion is actually very straightforward. So Sarah and I are doing research and really interested in the topic of uncertainty and age, and together also with Gudela, who sends her apologies, Gudela Grote, and so we thought, oh, we would really love to get some insights from experts, and so we also wanted to share this with you, as we also realized that there is an increasing interest in this topic, and also this morning during the PhD workshop and the panel discussion about crafting a academic career, we also realized, or I realized, that the word uncertainty fell quite a couple of times. So there seem to be specific phases during life where there is increased uncertainty, and it's yet to be investigated whether this is always negative or maybe sometimes also has opportunities and positive sides. So the goal of this panel discussion is threefold. First of all, we wanted to kind of understand what are the core themes and understand challenges and opportunities, but also to help identify gaps and stimulate research in that area guided by expert knowledge, and also to get advice on potential study designs and methodological pitfalls. So it is also an opportunity to clarify potential misconceptions. So we are very pleased to have our panelists here today, which is really interdisciplinary, from developmental psychology and organizational and industrial psychology. And now we will briefly introduce the panelists before we dive into the topic. So first of all, Alexandra Freund is joining us from Zurich. She's professor of the chair of developmental psychology, adulthood at the University of Zurich in Switzerland. And her research focuses on development of self-related cognitions and emotions across the lifespan, lifelong learning, role of goals, expectations, and research on self-regulation. And I'm sure everyone has also heard of the selection, optimization, and compensation theory, where she also is a founding researcher on the topic. And second, also Jutta Heckhausen is joining us today. She's a professor of psychological science at the University of California in Irvine in the United States. And her research focuses on the role of individuals as an active agent in major life course transitions and when they are confronted with challenging life events. And she also developed the motivational theory of lifespan events. Okay.
And then I present Mo Wang and Donald Traxillo. We all know very well Mo and Donald, very renowned IOP psychologist. Mo is professor at the Warrington College of Business at the University of Florida. Has been doing an amazing work in retirement transition, older worker, but a lot more occupational psychology. I only get a few of those. I hope that is fine. So leadership team process, and is very, very renowned for advanced quantitative methodology. So we really thank you for giving us a lot of feedback regarding this. And Donald is professor at the CAMI Business School, University of Limerick, and is also very renowned in job design and aging, and is also personal bias, saying amazing work on job design and aging. So a lot of employee selection, issue related to workplace safety and health, and recently also a lot of work in workability and age. So we would like really to thank you all our panelists for accepting our invitation. So we start with a huge applause for you. So the structure for the discussion, we ask our panelists first to present a statement in which they introduce their topic, but from an uncertainty perspective. So after their statement and presentation, we would like to open the discussion. We have also some questions, and we would love if you, of course, have questions and would like to intervene and, of course, create a nice interaction. Thank you again. Let's start maybe Donald first for the statement, if it's fine.
Sure.
Cool.
Okay, I'll try not to break this one. Okay, so I'm not really an expert on uncertainty, but I'll approach uncertainty from two areas of my work, which are job design and workability. So first, uncertainty may occur from job design changes in the new economy. And here I'm going to be referring to a paper that is coming out early next year in the annual review of org psych and org behavior with Sarah and with Franco Fraccaroli. And it's on how job design is affected by this new economy. So the nature of work and its design are changing rapidly due to the new economy because we're talking changes in work design, rapid changes in technology, including the use of generative AI, growth of gig work and short-term employment. A lot of jobs are disappearing, job insecurity is increasing, and at the same time, climate change is happening with its cascading social and health impacts. So all these factors can lead to uncertainty, in my view. So in terms of the new economy and changing technology, workers are now dealing with algorithmic management. By that I mean things like where there's no human boss. The example would be an Uber driver. And this can be especially difficult for older workers, I think, because of the loss of control and autonomy and loss of interpersonal connection. Actually, I think it's probably difficult for everybody in different degrees, but I think particularly in those ways for older workers. But at the same time, technology could help older workers, for instance, in the physical aspects of work. The new economy also means new economic and social policies around the globe, like loss or major job changes. The new economy could also mean shortened work weeks, or maybe even, like someday, a guaranteed minimum income on a large scale. The new economy also includes macro-environmental changes such as migration of younger workers for employment, another major economic and social impact. Climate change will likely also be part of the new economy and affect migration. The new economy may affect a shift in the psychological contracts with employers, such as changes in the employee-employer relationship, in things like commitments to employees and employers or the social exchange relationships. So, all these issues around the new economy could lead to uncertainty, in my view. And so what could we do in terms of our research on age differences at work with regards to this new economy? One would be to examine the cascading effects of shocks at different levels. By that I mean individual levels, team and organizational levels, and how these shocks play out maybe over the work lifespan. So maybe a shock that you receive early in career, like now, could affect you long term. Morgeson's event systems theory could be a useful framework for understanding these events of shocks and their effects on uncertainty. Do shocks and uncertainty have long-lasting effects across the work lifespan, as I said? What can organizations and societies do to support lifelong learning and adaptation on the part of older workers under these these conditions? What kinds of interventions can be developed to support workers across the lifespan in this unstable environment? How to design jobs to transition from current forms of work to profoundly different forms of work, including shortened work times and partial elimination of work. It also has me thinking about something. I tend to look at older workers in my research, but it also has me thinking about how this uncertainty in the world today can affect younger workers and whether it might shorten their future time perspective. And this may affect some of our assumptions about older and younger people and older and younger workers in particular. And again, jobs are disappearing, and so an uncertain future, and there's an uncertain bit in job design. One other area that I was going to touch on briefly is an area on workability, and a lot of my discussion dates, as some of you know, I'm working on this quite a bit right now. But it's an interest to me lately, and a lot of these comments are based on a meta-analysis that Grant Brady, who's a former PhD student, and I published a couple of years ago. The concept of workability, I know a lot of you know about it, it's gained traction as a concept in the aging literature, but it's the ability to see that you can meet the demands of your job, the psychological, emotional, and physical demands. It's an important predictor of many critical workplace outcomes like well-being, performance, later disability, retirement, and withdrawal. But regarding uncertainty, the thing I'm bringing up here, our meta-analysis identified a number of the antecedents of workability based in the job demands resources model. And 3 of these antecedents of workability are relevant to today's discussion of uncertainty. They may be important levers for us to consider. First is job control is a significant predictor of workability, and control is considered a resource under the JDR model. Also, job demands, like mental demands, are a significant predictor of workability, and role ambiguity is one particular demand that came out in the meta-analysis as a type of uncertainty that has effects on workability. And third, anxiety is a significant predictor of workability. So interestingly, we found grit and resilience in coworker and supervisor support are resources that can enhance workability and might be helpful in people dealing with uncertainty. So yeah, those are my comments for the moment. I'll come back to some of these when we get to the Q&A.
Alexandra, if you want to go next, thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot. I will sort of start general and then come to the uncertainties towards the end. So when I was thinking about preparing the statement, I was thinking we first need to clarify what do we mean by older workers? Because mostly, of course, there are not older adults as aging researchers would define them, which is typically post-retirement. But they would be considered young old, if anything, or more typically late middle-aged adults. And I think that's important when we think about what does aging at a workplace really mean. We're not talking about old age. The second part is that aging starts basically at birth with regard to work, not maybe at birth, but when you enter the workforce. And it is important that we keep that in mind, that the processes of aging but also the related uncertainties do not just like start at a certain age when you are an older worker, but the aging processes are like starting much earlier, even if you don't think of it as aging, but maybe of more maturing still in the workplace. But it's often applied just to the age group that people belong to, right? So it's seen as in the work, aging in the workplace, often referred to as like people who are 50 or older, on the older workers. So it's like, it makes sense to differentiate between, I think, the process and the age group that we're talking about if we talk about aging in the workplace. So what are those changes that occur that are related, I think, to uncertainty also? One of the most prominent changes that most people think about are cognitive changes. And we know that fluid cognitive abilities decline. Speed of processing and related kinds of cognitive abilities, but knowledge-based cognitive abilities continue to increase, often compensating very easily for losses in fluid abilities. And as most jobs and professions rely strongly on such knowledge-based skills, older workers shouldn't be at a disadvantage, but they're perceived as such. And I think that is an important point that contributes at least to doubts that people might have when it comes to older workers and about themselves as they age. Other losses are health-related losses, physical losses, sensory functioning. But as meta-analyses show, older workers do not have more sick days. The absences there are no more absences again. It is assumed by many employees and employers, and colleagues that older workers will stay home more. It's actually not true, but it's something that people have to fight against, this perception or this fear that they would be. I think the social changes, the shrinking of the network doesn't really play a role here because your colleagues are your colleagues are your colleagues. Question of like, are you still embedded in their social network? There is no evidence for lower social skills In fact, if anything, there's a stronger social orientation when people start to age. And that I believe is important for many, many, many jobs and professions, because most of us work in teams by now. And you have contact with customers and so on. I believe that this is one of the areas that is strength that is often overlooked because it's one of those soft skills. Although we all acknowledge how important they are, it's often, again, overlooked. With regards to motivation, there are no indicators that motivation generally decreases with age, although you sometimes hear this, but Jutta and I can maybe debate this, but I think we're both of the opinion that there's no indication that overall there is a shrinking of motivation, but I think we both agree that there are changes in motivation and in what gets people or keeps people going at work. I focus very much on the changes in your motivational orientation, and a lot of studies have shown that maintenance orientation increases from younger to middle-aged adults, and towards older adulthood, people become also more loss-oriented, and that is in fact not a bad thing, but it is related to subjective well-being, it is related to persistence in pursuing tasks, and it is relating to also learning processes, as I've recently shown. Nevertheless, this is something that might cause uncertainty, in that most work environments, most companies, institutions have a strong focus on gains. So the older you get at the workplace, the more you might experience a mismatch between your individual personal motivation and the one that you're supposed to follow. You have to produce gains, because if you don't, if there's stability, that is often seen as a regress, actually, and as a problem for any company. So you have to show in capitalistic societies an increase and gains. And if you don't, you're in trouble. And that might be a problem that creates friction and that creates uncertainty when you age and in the workplace. Similarly, I've alluded to several perceptions of older adults, some of them true, most of them maybe not so true, that would disadvantage older workers, and that might increase uncertainty when it comes to the competition regarding younger colleagues. We know from research that continued education is less available and accessible for older workers, even though they would be interested in it oftentimes, but employers less often provide access to continued education to aging workers. And that might again increase this perception of older workers like, am I left behind when it comes to skills with new technologies, with skills when it comes to using them, not only knowing about them, but also actually using them. And the stereotype of like, oh yeah, the kids are just like natives, digital natives, because they know how to swipe a iPhone. But that's the perception. Even though the swiping is really not an understanding or deep skill that people acquire, it's just more of a habit, but it still creates a lot of uncertainty, and I think hindrances to engage with new technologies and to keep up to date, which is of course extremely important, as we know that the half-life of knowledge decreases a lot. There seems to be an exponential function regarding the half-life of knowledge. So it decreases faster and faster, not in the person, but in general with regard to technologies and skills. I believe that this is in general might create uncertainty and self-doubt in aging workers regarding their own abilities. And what they can contribute to a company, to an institution in which they work. And there's one huge uncertainty, but I'm not going to talk about this because Mo Wang is on the panel and he's the expert on this, and that's retirement. Of course, the transition to retirement, we know that this creates a lot of uncertainty in many people. That they feel like, okay, I might lose my identity, I might lose my daily structure, my self-worth, and so on and so forth, but Mo's going to talk more about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. I'll ask more. Okay, Jutta. Jutta, if you can go next. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm an older worker in this profession, so I'm used to slides. So I'm gonna share my screen with a few slides. Okay. Yeah, so I'd like to focus on the uncertainty and how and what regulates this uncertainty. You know, how do individual agents in society come together in this? And what happens in different parts of the lifespan? But first of all, life courses are a joint product. I mean, so maybe I should say first, this is kind of more of a bird's eye view, much further away, you know, not as specific as some of the earlier, or the earlier contributors were talking. So it's more about regulation around uncertainty in general when it comes to the life course and specifically to careers. So first of all, the life course and careers in particular are a joint product of biological, societal, and individual processes. And when I talk about, and I want to focus here, I mean, Alexandra has touched on the biological aging and how that contributes to certain trajectories and adaptational challenges as people move from midlife to old age. I'd like to focus a little bit more on the interface between societal structuring and individual agency. And when I talk about societal structuring, it's about how societal institutions, educational and corporate and state-based institutions create timetables, sequences, and beyond sequences, of course, you know, these apply to everyone, but then we have the social structure, social inequalities in the access to these different steps and qualifications and so on. I think we can think about regulation in the career life or in life course in general, more or less kind of as a zero-sum game between societal structuring and individual. If you have too little societal structuring, then the load on the regulation is exclusively on the individual, too much uncertainty. The individual doesn't have the scaffold they need to regulate, to think about goals in an organized fashion. But on the other hand, societal structuring, especially when it comes to social inequality and accessing these transitions, can create too many constraints and block social mobility for individuals. In general, the more transitions you have, the more decision points, the more revision opportunities in a career or an educational and vocational career, the more chances for individual agency you have. And if you have a very tight structuring of, you know, educational requirements, for example, and training and so on, in order to move forward in a career, the less the individual can exert individual agency. So we could ask ourselves, what is the optimal degree of societal structuring of careers? And that, of course, depends in part on what the individual brings to the table. And that's my next slide here. So what are the individual differences that really make a difference when dealing with uncertainty in careers? And I'd like to talk briefly about three aspects. First, we refer to as optimized goal choice. So how can what are the smart heuristics for choosing goals, for choosing career-related goals? First of all, the individual should consider timing, onset of opportunity, and deadlines of opportunities to reach certain goals, for example, for promotions. And here we could ask ourselves, maybe this is something that is most important earlier in careers and gets less and less important as the time horizon shrinks later in careers. Second smart heuristic is to consider costs and benefits for other domains of life, work-family conflicts, and so on. And that is something that has become more prevalent and more important and more accepted even as a consideration in younger generations. I see that in my own son, who's not just going for the optimal promotion, but saying if that means an 80-hour work week, I'm not going to go for that because it'll constrain the rest of my life too much. A third smart heuristic is having a plan B. And that's, of course, the more important, the more uncertain long-term careers are with technological change, whether you can actually stay in that or have the opportunity to switch to something else. And having a plan B works better if you have a broader educational base that is transferable to other careers. Again, this is something that is probably more important in earlier parts of career, less important as you age, as your time horizon or the need for switching to a plan B can come about. And finally, what about the values and the intrinsic motives you have about careers? What you truly prefer to do and what you truly want to serve or want to contribute to society. And that's something that early on in careers, you also have to think about the financial payoff more and so on. That may become more important as you age, so that you try to focus more on aspects that you truly value and like. So that's about the smart heuristics. Secondly, goal adjustment capacity. And under uncertainty conditions, being able to adjust your goals is essential. If you stick to things and run into the wall, that's not going to be helpful. And also, if you feel like if you don't get the goal you want and then you have to give up, that's not ideal also. So goal adjustment is essential. To not give up, but lower one's aspirations if needed. The ability to stretch your timeline. If it doesn't work out in this time frame, maybe I can give myself more time for this next promotion or for this job change. To focus on a subset of skills or demands in a given goal, in a given career that you are better at, that has better potential long term, and so on. And finally, to avoid defeat and self-blame if things don't work out for you, so that you don't impair your future goal pursuit based on one failure in an earlier one. Third complex of individual differences in self-regulation is about volition, how you volitionally self-manipulate or self-mobilize for goal commitment. And that's works through enhancing your evaluation of a goal, enhancing your perceived control and competence in a given career goal, and to not get distracted by alternatives or by other life domains when it is essential to pursue a given goal and when it's sort of embattled. So much about individual differences. that make a difference. And finally, the last slide here, if we think about different times in adulthood, in the different career stages, what are the typical challenges that individuals are facing, and that then have to be met or not, can be met or not met by individual strengths? First of all, career entry, that's not really the topic here, but you know, being a lifespan developmentalist, I can't help but say this. So here we have in different countries very different transitions between school and work life, especially for those who are not going through a college, you know, so through a higher education path. In some countries like Germany and Poland and Switzerland, you have apprenticeships that are highly structuring this transition and allowing the individual to follow a clear path that doesn't require a lot of regulatory agency. In other countries, it's very unstructured, to the point that these youths are talked about as the forgotten half. And here the uncertainty becomes so overwhelming that most youth flounder and have, you know, pretty bad outcomes. That about career entry. Next, mid-career transitions. And here the critical question is how permeable are career tracks? You know, how possible is it that somebody later on in a career switches over to a different career or makes a jump into a higher position? And if that's possible, and countries, again, vocational systems, institutional regulations allow this more or less in different countries. If you have high permeability, you have more potential for the individual to be agentic and make a difference in their life courses. Then another thing, mid-career is very prominent, work-life conflicts, and that means the individual has to be able to juggle multiple goals. And in longer term goals, you know, developmental goals, that is really tricky, because it's not like you can stick to one goal until you've got it and then you go to the next goal, but you have to almost pretty much on a daily basis do something for the one and the other, you know, for all of those, and keep these balls in the air and move forward with them. Third, mid-career is, or the midlife is, the time of deadlines, where opportunities that once were super great now kind of get diminished, and there, you know, where you have your opportunities to switch careers becomes more constrained, and careers peak out, and you start on a having a plateau experience, or even a decline. And individuals need to deal with that in some productive fashion. And that brings us to the next phase, late career transformation and retirement. Career plateaus and declines, how do we deal with that? And there are both institutional answers to this, you know, like in job design, as well as joint, ideal scenarios of job crafting, where the employer and the worker create an adaptive job description that matches the capacities, the strengths and weaknesses of the worker. Then the question comes when to retire, and that is often not a matter of free choice, but more of a financial need, especially in countries like the US that have less financial security, less developed pension systems. And that often leads to mixed forms of retirement, where people retire from one job, but then can work in another job that is lower level. And here the question is, what kind of models can we imagine here that are not just based on the individual's, haphazard, maybe even attempts to secure some kind of minimal income into old age. What about, and there are models of gradual retirement, and I think that is something that could be more developed, especially, also models of retirement and voluntary work in the community. Okay, to summarize, what we have to do, the general desiderata for future research is to identify the specific challenges of uncertainty for individual agency in a given developmental social ecology, in a given career, in a given point in the lifespan, in a given society. What are the constraints and opportunities there? And then to see whether they are matched or not matched by the individual's self-regulatory strengths. And that should decide over whether somebody's this is a success story or a story of failure and decline. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jutta. And then,
okay. Well, thank you very much for the great talks so far. So I hope I live up to the same standard. So actually, when Julian and Sarah asked me to serve on the panel, I was like, oh, uncertainty in retirement transition, that's pretty easy. It should be very easy to talk about. But then I did a quick literature search, actually. Not many papers actually turned up. So the interesting thing is when we talk about uncertainty of retirement, oftentimes the literature is only talking about the stress perspective of retirement. So basically it's like a short-term kind of view about, retirement is a life change event. And it must bring some stress, and part of stress is due to it's difficult for you to predict what's going to happen after retirement. So yeah, so majority of literature is taking a stress perspective. Well, given that I'm a retirement researcher and I always take a multi-level perspective on it, so I actually was thinking, okay, so if I'm going to study retirement uncertainty, how I would approach this issue. So taking a multi-level view, actually, I summarized 6 major factors I think we should talk about. 6 major aspects where uncertainty would arise. And I'm going to start with the macro factors, then we're going to move to the meso, and then the micro factors. So the largest actually macro factor is actually regulatory and the policy uncertainty. Actually, like in countries with mature policy governance and in countries with democracy, actually, you probably don't experience a lot of uncertainty about that. However, in a lot of other parts of the world, actually, when there's some dictatorship or some kind of autocratic country governance system, they actually change retirement policy and the pension policy very dramatically. And oftentimes that leaves actually older workers very difficult to cope with those kind of changes. And those changes could involve like a pension benefit payment difference. A lot of time it involves like eligibility changes. And oftentimes actually the interesting thing is this year there's a lot of strikes in France. And because they were protesting against policy change for retirement. But actually, the French government, if you really look into like the reforms they want to do, it's actually a very gradual reform. It's like when they implement it, actually there's no uncertainty about it. It's like people will get 3-4 years gradual period to adjust to it. So comparing to some other countries in the world, actually that would be a system without much uncertainty. But then the other countries, they could actually postpone. Like I've seen cases like they actually started with 50-year-old retirement age, and then suddenly it becomes like 60. So they just increased the retirement age for 10 years. Well, no one is prepared for that. So that's the policy level uncertainty. The second type of macro level uncertainty is really the financial uncertainty. That's the financial conditions. For example, market volatility, right? So basically, we all know the financial markets can fluctuate, and a lot of the retirement pension funds are actually tied to the stock market or bond market. Just what happened this year, actually in UK, actually last year, right? When their prime minister had to resign, right? That's because the bond market, dropped like crazy, right? And that's very difficult to manage for actually retirees or soon-to-be retirees. And then another thing actually in the US we're experiencing is the inflation risk, right? So because of the pandemic and the government actually supplied so much liquidity to the financial market, therefore we're actually experiencing huge inflation, and of course there's a price to pay for the inflation. And much of those kind of uncertainty, it's actually a little bit difficult for individual people to manage. So although the literature always talk about this, it's stressful, but we know stress have different effects, right? When the stress are controllable or you can actually deal with it, it's less likely to create really bad effects, right? But if there are things you couldn't control, then the strain is going to be real. So those are the macro level factors. And then at the meso level, then earlier also I think people talked about family and the social connections, right? So actually with retirement, actually the availability of family support and the social networks can always change. Actually, when we're getting into a later part of the lifespan, oftentimes the social circle becomes smaller, and then the social network research actually show when you lose a critical node in your social circle, it's actually hard to replace. So that actually creates uncertainty for our social life. And then moving toward the individual level factors, so of course the cognitive decline. And actually the interesting thing is we know that when people get older, there is a fluid intelligence decline, right? But actually, if you look at the literature on dementia, they are really bad at predicting who's gonna have dementia early on. So right now, I think the best forecast, they said, the earliest sign you can see would be 3 to 4 years early. Then you really show a serious symptom. But it makes dementia really difficult to prevent or catch at the beginning. So that's actually one type of uncertainty presenting to people. Then also in terms of health uncertainty, so actually in the ergonomics literature, then we know that even for older workers, if they have a fall at work, the recovery is going to take much longer than when people are younger. So those kind of risk factors actually a little bit difficult to manage, will bring uncertainty. And then when it comes to the health, the cognitive and the health decline kind of uncertainty, it also brings a healthcare uncertainty. So actually, there are two major issues actually, at least I see in the public health literature. One is the medical expense. So actually, the medical expense, at least in the United States, the inflation rate of medical expense is way higher than the general inflation rate. So right now, the US is looking at probably about 4% inflation, but the medical expense inflation is 12%. So basically, every year you're paying more and more for the medical expense. I mean, for the European countries, technically your government, it's a public service, right? But the thing is, the government is actually paying way more and more also on the medical expense. To make that sustainable, it's actually a big uncertainty. Another uncertainty is actually long-term care planning. So Actually, I was not aware of that issue at all, but then in July, I was in Sydney for a long-term care conference, and then I learned a lot about it. Oh my God, it's very scary, because obviously the government doesn't have enough money to cover it. And then if you want to, like in the US, you actually have a combination model of a self-funded long-term care plus the government one. But the scary part is, so the government one will not kick in unless you run out of all your money. So that's very, very scary, right? Think about this, like you would be like a penniless, then the government will take over. So how are you be able to ensure the quality of life for your later years, right? So I think that's a very important uncertainty to mention. Not to scare people, by the way, just, yeah. And then the final set of factors are actually psychological and emotional uncertainty, right? So oftentimes, actually, this actually we have some data on. So we see like people actually have a very different forecast before retirement and after retirement about their attitude about the retirement and how well they can adapt to the lifestyle change. So that oftentimes creates some challenge for people. And then, of course, the other side would be identity and the purpose, right? So oftentimes when we actually picture retirement, we probably have an ideal identity or ideal role we want to play. But then very quickly you meet the reality and you realize, oh, wait a second, that's not the kind of retirement life I want, right? So then it requires a lot of adjustment, and that kind of uncertainty is oftentimes overlooked. So yeah, so those are the 6 aspects I see from the literature. Well, I mean, actually that literature is quite empty, so I think it's a good direction for people to study. I will be very friendly to papers on those topics. So yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mo.
Thank you so much for all your input. I think we maybe just, so we have a couple of prepared questions, so maybe we just ask 1 or 2, and then we just quickly, and then we open up for potential questions from the audience. So just very briefly, we heard a lot of different aspects of uncertainty, but overall, how uncertainty has been viewed or conceptualized is often like very negatively connotated. So, but on the other hand, not knowing for sure what happens in the future could also potentially entail opportunities. This is at least a point Gudela and I, for example, make in our commentary. So we're just wondering, do you think that is a potential point, a valid point, or is it just overall more negative, or how do we have to conceptualize it in that way? Thank you. Whoever wants to start. Yes, please. Alexandra, please.
Okay, I don't see you, so I don't know when you look at me. Okay, sorry. Yes, I think there are huge individual differences in how uncertainty is perceived. And I believe that for many people, it's quite an aversive state to not know how your life, like what you can rely upon, the aspects that Jutta has pointed out about these structures and Mo has pointed out about the uncertainties when it comes to your finances and so on. So I think that these are the kinds of uncertainties that very few people would see as wonderful opportunity. I don't know where my money will come from. That's very unlikely. The uncertainties that might be perceived more as opportunities, and I think that very much depends on what also Jutta has pointed out, but more as well, is like how controllable do I perceive these areas in life? So it's not uncertainty in general, I would think, but it's is there a, do I have the space? Do I have the opportunity? Is there enough potential for me that I can shape what the future is going to look like, and that I can manage in a way that they conform to my goals, that I can pursue my goals. This is like then opening up. But I think this uncertainty in terms of like, I don't know where my money's come from. I think people would be hard pressed to say that this is actually a positive opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I chime in there? And I just building on what Alexandra just said, uncertainty without opportunity is really problematic. And there's been research on the dissolution, when the Soviet Union fell apart and the in Eastern European and other countries that were part of that had a vacuum of power. In those cases where there was economic opportunity, that uncertainty created an opportunity for people to build businesses and, take totally new paths that they would otherwise not have been able to take. But in a lot of these states that were developed, because they were such abysmal economic situations, the uncertainty just created downfall and poverty and problems. So in a similar vein, it has to be combined. So one possibility that I think is one should think about is this whole notion of permeability of careers, whether you can change, whether you can use some skills that you have, build on those and move to a different line of work that has more promise in society and so on. I think that would be an important aspect to look at.
First of all, I agree with the internal and external idea, but there's also, I think, one of the things that I think has come up in this discussion is how it's interpreted by the individual, whether the person has the resources to deal with it, whether it's almost like a stressor, a little bit might be good, but a lot could be really bad. And the other thing is it a short-term or long-term uncertainty? Is it like, will they have the sandwich I want at lunch? I'm joking. Or am I making a retirement decision which could affect the entire trajectory of the rest of my life and I have to make it to 95 and will I be able to do that? So that's a big United States question. Some of you may recognize. So, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I'll add to that. So actually, recently I did a paper with Ari Kugelaski. We actually tried to come up with a psychological model about how people approach uncertainty in a positive way. So actually, the model we built it emphasizes a lot of past life experiences. So basically, you can be facing an uncertain situation. However, in the past life history, if you had a similar experience and that kind of uncertainty ended up with good results, that's actually more likely make you very excited or having a positive view when you face that certain uncertainty. So that was the idea about how uncertainty would brew, positivity for how you deal with the situation. So of course it was a theory building paper, so we don't have empirical data that much to support it, but we feel like as a theoretical exercise, it's doable. So.
So I play as a panelist now in the sense I would like also to build on what Mo is mentioning. So we are also working in a project on uncertainty mindset. And so we also thought about potentially can be also seen as a threat, but also as an opportunity. So can be felt as I can control it or I cannot control it. But the idea was like general beliefs that you have. And we were quite impressed finding out, so few data that we are collecting right now, that we are seeing that people have quite an idea, or let's say this mindset of seeing uncertainty as an opportunity is quite high. And we were very surprised. I mean, we really thought that the majority would have this threat feeling, right? I'm not in control. And this is something that is changing also a little bit our view of the problem, right? And so I think it's extremely interesting to understand and really to have data or try to do more research on this. So
Yeah, for the last couple of minutes, maybe we open up also
Yes.
for potential questions from the audience, if there are any. Please, Raphael.
Thank you for this very interesting panel. I have two questions. One question for more about the last paper that you mentioned. Were you using the life course theory or life course perspective on this? And the second question is also for Mo and maybe for Donald. At the meso level, you didn't emphasize on the organizational influence. What is needed by organizations to for less uncertainty? Is it that because there is not enough research on the subject, or another reason?
Oh, the first question, actually, for that paper, we didn't go with a lifespan theory building. Well, if you know Ari Kuglaski's work, he's actually very much on like a motivational and a self-regulation, so less from a developmental psychology perspective. So we were really building it as based on like a human memory system, and how does the cognitive processing impact how people deal with uncertainty. So that was the first question. The second question, actually, okay, this is a very good question. Well, as an organizational psychologist, I would always view organizational practice as important, right? However, in the grand scheme of retirement research, actually, if you want to see how organization really shape people's management of uncertainty for retirement, the evidence is not very strong. So, I mean, the only thing you see is if the organization offer like a phased retirement system or offer some kind of gradual retirement system that can help retirees to ease into retirement. Doesn't mean it's gonna eliminate uncertainty. So the organizations can do is they can encourage people to do planning for retirement, but they cannot do the job to manage the uncertainty for the retiree. So that's why I actually didn't review that when I was talking about it.
So, and actually on the retirement point, I think one of the things my understanding is that it's very difficult sometimes to get people to do the retirement planning, even if you're asking them, please do this. You won't be sorry at some point in your life, but people don't do it. In terms of what can organizations do, I mean, I guess there's not necessarily that much on yet that I'm aware of large amounts of uncertainty research per se in the literature. So, I mean, it's out there. But I'm thinking, I'm still going, my default is distress, like Mo mentioned before. And it would be things like providing social support, you know, for the supervisor and the coworker seems to be a huge thing. It's the sort of the interpersonal stuff at work is sort of the things that pull people down more than almost, in my view, more than almost anything sort of technical. And what can you do in terms of helping people to manage their health, helping them to reframe uncertainty, although I'm not sure we're ready to know that, to know how to do that, and maybe giving people support for job crafting, you know, allowing them flexibility as they get older to help them choose which things they're going to focus on most. But these are sort of shots in the dark,
So actually, I want to add this. So the interesting thing is, last time NIH put a funding, guidance panel together. So actually, Karen O'Brien and I both were talking to them, and we're like, oh, we need to collect longitudinal data from organizations to study this. They didn't like it. So because they are like, yeah, it's very interesting because they would say like, oh, why would we pay for the organizations to understand this, right? They feel like this is too pro-business. But I think, well, maybe the cost can organize and get the European funding agency to do something like that. Or maybe the Scandinavian countries, you guys already collect data from the firms. I mean, maybe you guys can do something. Because in the US, like NIH, they wouldn't touch it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Alexandra or Jutta, would you like to add anything to that, or? Okay. Maybe we have time for one last question. Please, Brent. Oh, please, Jürgen.
Yeah, thank you. Mo, you can relax. I will only ask you a question over dinner. So I would like to follow up a little bit on Juta's ideas on developmental psychology and would like to reflect about how can we use this and apply it in organizational settings. I understood that the more people have opportunities to make decisions, have more degrees of freedom to make new choices for their career, how should we structure late careers? And is it not a mistake by organizations not to let people experience changes in their jobs, new opportunities to balance their life again, so that they become more resilient in face of retirement? Would it not help employees, for instance, to make changes every 2 or 3 years in their jobs so they are used to changing their balance again and be much more relaxed regarding retirement and the post-retirement period?
Yeah, that that sounds like would be ideal if one could realize that. I mean, it's going to create a lot of organizational logistical problems for the employer, especially if the workforce is sort of not mixed enough, age mixed enough. If you have a lot of people the same age, say if you have a company that just grew at a certain point and then has a lot of people in the same age aging together, because you would conceivably still have all these functions that need to be fulfilled. But I mean, from an individual point of view, certainly if people could change and would have the opportunity to focus on things that they have newly discovered, or that they have developed. For example, mentoring others may not be in somebody's job description to begin with, but could be added as they gather experience, and now may not have the physical prowess to do the job in all its demands, but convey their experiences and skills to others. So that sort of thing, and of course, as there's social inequality in that possibility too. So you have a lot of careers that peak pretty early, and then you don't have a lot of leeway there. But then the more enriched and more based on professional education a job is, the more possibilities you have to modify those and enrich those in ways that matches with aging.
If I might just add, I entirely agree, and I think the lack of fluidity in the job descriptions that a lot of people face when they're for longer times in a specific job is a problem that could be circumvented. It's not easy. It's not that like you cannot come in and every day redefine what your position is, what your role is, and what your job is. Of course, there has to be some stability, but I think the lack of fluidity in redefining or adding some aspects and maybe disengaging from other aspects in your job, where with your changing profile and strength, is something that I think could be done much more with fewer problems than one typically sees. But I was listening also when Jutta said about mentoring, because I know that Julian has done quite a lot of work on exactly that aspect, and it's actually pretty tricky, if I may summarize your work in one sentence on this.
All right. Any last comments, maybe, or from the panelists, or no, or it's okay?
Maybe Julia, to tell us what's so tricky about mentoring in old age.
Mentoring. Oh, well, I didn't prepare that. What's so tricky? I think a lot of uncertainty. and a lot of opportunities to explore, because social interactions, as you know, include a lot of uncertainties related to both partners of social of that social interaction, and potential norms, but also individual perceptions. So maybe to summarize. But so there is definitely uncertainty on many different levels. And maybe to conclude, thank you very much for the panelists to join today for this panel discussion on uncertainty and on age in the new era of work. We've got a lot of inspiring ideas to external uncertainty, but also to uncertainty resided within individuals related to aging. And with that, we would like to close. And thank you very much again for joining from Zurich, Alexandra Freund, for waking up quite early in California, Jutta Eckhausen. Thank you so much for joining. And also our panelists here, Donald Truxillo and Mo Wang. Thank you so much for your excellent thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much